If y'all, if, we're going to be at ease just for a few more minutes to allow some more members to make their way here. We're going to go ahead and call the Appropriations Committee on Higher Ed to order, and we'll start off. We have an agenda. I think a lot of good presentations today from our higher ed partners. And again, welcome. I appreciate the great attendance. We will have a few more members that are heading this way as they get through with other meetings to join us. First, we're going to welcome President Lynn Riley from the Georgia Student Finance Commission. I know, Lynn, you have an engagement you need to get to, another appointment, so I want to go ahead and make sure you have adequate time to make a presentation.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Mr. Chairman, can you hear me? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee, for inviting me to present today to the House Higher Education Appropriations Subcommittee. A bit of an overview of what the agency does before we dive into the specifics of the fiscal 24 budget. We'll start off with our first slide, just to give an illustration of our organization. We are actually 3 entities in one. We administer 3 different unique agencies: the Georgia Student Finance Commission, the Georgia Student Finance Authority, and the Georgia Higher Education Assistance Corporation. The programs that we administer under the oversight of the Commission Board are our HOPE programs that are lottery funded, and you can see by this presentation we have HOPE Scholarship, public and private, Zell Miller Scholarships, public and private, HOPE and Zell Miller Grants, our HOPE Career Grant, and our HOPE High School Equivalency Grant. Also administered by the Commission is our dual enrollment program that is funded by state dollars. The Georgia Student Finance Authority administers a number of state programs, and I won't read the entire list, but you can see that it's an extensive number of programs. Some of the highlights are student access loans, which provide low-interest loans to borrowers in Georgia. Our most recent addition, the Georgia College Completion Grant, and the Georgia tuition equalization grants are the primary function. However, you'll see on this list that we have a number of military and other service cancelable programs and scholarships that we offer across the state for our Georgia students. We have just one program that has been administered by the corporation. The Georgia Higher Education Assistance Corporation was created back in the 60s to serve as a guarantor for federal loan programs that were serviced by the authority. We paid claims for the federal family education loans and through the corporation, and provided as a guarantor for those loans that we owned and held and serviced on behalf of the federal government. However, in 2013, that loan portfolio, after the federal government ceased to participate in that program, we sold the loan portfolio to the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency under a 10-year revenue sharing agreement. And that agreement has just expired. There'll be no further revenue stream from that program. So the board of directors of the corporation have recommended that we terminate the corporation and liquidate it. And we have legislation that has been introduced to statutorily dissolve the corporation. It has been offered. Chairman Chuck Martin is carrying that bill, and we hope to have a hearing soon. Just some highlights of what we do at Student Finance. The Hope Scholarship Program, as many know, has been in existence for 30 years now. The first awards were offered in September of 1993, and $21 million in awards went out that very first semester, or fiscal year 93. But we have served 2.1 million students with our Hope Scholarship loan and other lottery-funded programs in the 30 years of its existence. This slide indicates that over $13.7 billion in HOPE awards have occurred over 30 years' time. I will advise the members of the committee that we will hit the $14 billion mark by the time this semester is over, this current fiscal year. Now to the specific budget items. As you can see, the governor's recommendation for commission administration, lines 44.2.1 through 44.2.4, recommendation nets at $231,043. These are statewide changes, the COLA increases proposed by the governor, as well as some other statewide adjustments to our premiums and TeamWorks billing adjustments. The second item under commission administration, 44.2.5, is a reduction of just over 1.6 million. As members may recall, this was also reflected as a reduction in the 23 budget. Funding that was provided to the agency last year that was included in the governor's disregard language last May, and so these dollars are being taken out of our base budget for 24. Item 44.4.1 is a transfer of funds to the tuition equalization grant program that is based on a Department of Audits and Accounts performance audits, indicating that these funds could transfer over to be used for tuition equalization grants. And number 4 on this slide, line 44.7.1, an increase in funding for our HOPE grant program to meet our projected needs in FY 2024, and also to accommodate the governor's recommendation to increase the award factor rate to 100%. The next item is 44.9.1, HOPE private funding of $1.449 million. This appropriation is to increase the funds to meet the projected need for HOPE scholarship awards at our private institutions. Under HOPE Public, 44.10.1, $57,923,646. This is to increase funding to meet projected utilization in FY 2024, and also to increase the HOPE scholarship award factor rate to 100% in FY 2024. And Mr. Chairman, I'll speak a little bit more about that after I complete the line items in the budget. Item 44.16.1, service cancelable loans, a reduction of $1.7 million. This is something that we spoke about in the amended FY 2023 budget. House Bill 1319 that was introduced in last year's session was not passed, and the governor's disregard language when he signed the budget last May was to set aside these dollars since the bill had not been adopted, that these dollars would sit down and actually are going to be contemplated in this current year budget. And part of that is reflected in the next line, 44.16.2, a total of $3.2 million that will increase funds to provide a student loan repayment program to support recruitment and retention of public law enforcement officers. House Bill 130 was heard in the Higher Education Committee last week, providing for this student loan repayment program for which this $3.2 million would provide funding. And finally, on this slide, tuition equalization grant change, an increase of $315,000, which would be transferring the funds from the Scholarship for Engineer program to the tuition equalization program, again, based on a recommendation from the 2017 Department of Audits and Accounts Performance Audit Report. So if I could take a minute and just provide with some illustrations of what the impacts are of increasing the HOPE award factor rate as envisioned by Governor Kemp's FY 2024 budget. This first slide, you may recall, was presented to members of the committee last year that spoke to how the HOPE award in FY 2022 covered the amount of the tuition that a student was paying in that fiscal year. And as you can see from the red bars at the top of this slide, those are the institutions where there was less than 90% of the tuition that was being charged to a student was covered by the HOPE scholarship award. Those that are in the blue lines were receiving at close to 90% or above in FY 2022. For the FY 2023 academic and budget year, the General Assembly and through Governor Kemp's recommendation provided funding for a minimum of 90% of tuition to be covered by the HOPE Scholarship Award in FY 2023. So in Governor Kemp's FY 2024 budget recommendation, funding is being provided, part of that $57 million in that budget line item will be to bring all of the institutions to an award factor rate of 100% of the prior year's tuition. And I make a special point of that because some have asked, well, the Zell Miller Scholarship is 100% of tuition. What's the difference? The Zell Miller Scholarship provides 100% of a current year's tuition coverage, whereas a HOPE Scholarship provides a percentage based on the factor rate of a prior year's tuition. So I point that out for some distinction between the way the HOPE Scholarship and the Zell Scholarship are calculated. This slide provides a presentation of the potential number of students that are impacted. As you can see, the TCSG institutions, all students will be impacted because their tuition is a set amount across all of their different campuses. But you can see that Kennesaw State is the top USG institution that will impact the most students when FY 2024 budget is adopted, and the factor rate, if accepted and approved at 100%, will benefit over 18,500 students. And also Georgia State is projected to benefit over 14,700 students in FY 2024, with an increase in the amount of the award as it applies against their tuition. And the HOPE recipients in FY 2024 will receive additional lottery dollars based on the prior year's tuition rate. The impact for students will depend on the tuition rate at the institution and, of course, how many semester hours the students are taking. But you can see the increases range from a $509 increase per semester for Georgia Tech students down to a $90 increase for students at some of the state colleges. So to put this in real context for students, these are semester amounts, but for example, at the Georgia Institution of Technology in FY 2024, moving to 100% factor rate would mean an additional $1,000 award for that student in their academic year 2024. So thank you for the time before you today, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Under the slide and the potential semester impact for a full-time student, how many hours is typically a full-time student?
Thank you for that question. That would be 15 hours we are basing these projections on.
And I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and this may be something that not only President Riley, but others who other our higher institutions come before you. I think there's some questions that I, as far as the committee budget hearing and the bigger appropriations, that we're trying to look at. And again, you may not have the answers today, but if you could, look at these answers. But for the 2024, does the money included in the proposed budget for the 2000 COLA adequately fund all of your agency?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman. We are in a unique circumstance because we have three entities, the commission, the authority, and the corporation. We do a time allocation based on each employee's level of effort for the programs within each of the corporations. So when we spread those costs across the different entities, the appropriation provides only for the commission portion of the time spent on behalf of the students.
You may want to get some detailed information there. Number two, what is the head count? How many vacancies do you have? And that, again, you may not have the answers, but if you could look at that.
We would be happy to provide you further information on that. I know we today may only have a few, but we have abolished a number or defunded them because we didn't have sufficient appropriation to be able to fill those positions.
Okay. Then what is your turnover rate within your agency?
Thank you for that question. I'll have to get back to you. We do have some revolving door activity. I will say that I've had two directors, senior level directors, retire in the past couple of months, with a third one on the way.
Okay. And then we would also, as a committee, like to know, do you have all of any capital needs that aren't currently being funded? That will be a fourth question.
I thank you for that question, and today I wouldn't have an immediate answer for you, but we will make sure that we provide it.
And then the fifth question is, do you collect any fees that cover the operations of your department that we do not appropriate? And if so, what are they, and how much, and what are they used for?
Mr. Chairman, I can answer that question.
Okay.
The authority collects interest on those student access loans. We collect origination fees, and we collect late fees if a borrower is late in making prompt payment. Those fees provide for revenue to cover the costs for us to administer the student access loan program and other programs that are administered by the authority.
Still, if you could, respond later.
We will be happy to delineate that for you.
Any questions from the committee? And again, I want to thank President Raleigh. I know that what the Student Finance Commission does is very important. I know on the over the years we've added more and more responsibility to make sure that we're properly administering these state funds. As you saw earlier in the slide, the committee, the number of responsibilities and the programs that the Finance Commission is over. So I, for one, appreciate it because I know you're data-driven, and as we build these systems, we're going to be able to get better and better data out of it to make sure that we're informative, we're helping our taxpayers, but we're also making sure that we can track what we're doing. And I certainly appreciate all that you've done in the last couple of years as we've sought to make sure you had what you needed to take on these additional responsibilities.
Well, I thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. We're very proud of our ability to develop data and provide that for analytical purposes for the members of the Assembly.
Mm-hmm. Members of the committee, any questions? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
President
Thank you,
Riley, we
members.
appreciate it. Thank you for being here, and I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Chancellor Perdue, the university system.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Thank you and the members of the committee. I have a very simple presentation today, and in fact, I'm not even going to use slides for you. I think we provided you with a one-pager that goes with your tracking sheets there. We'll speak from that, as well as one other page that we'll talk about in just a second. If you'll notice on the tracking sheet for the top three items, they include the COLA, our health insurance, and our Department of Administration insurance requirements. That is the bulk of that $121 million increase this year, from 82 in the COLA, 17 on the health insurance, and 13 in the insurance. You can see the enrollment growth is simply down to $7.5 million this year. We all understand that 20 out of 26 institutions have less students, and a challenge in that regard as well. M&O growth, I think about 340,000 square feet change made a M&O increase of 2.3 million. You'll see that the earlier funds that you all had provided earlier for the AAU UGA medical partnership, startup funds are withdrawn from that. And then, as we mentioned in our B unit, the federal Fort Valley State land grant match is a transfer from the BU to educational and general funds in that regard. So that comprises $121 million total for yours in those tracking sheets there. In the B unit, as you can see, the COLA for the cost of living in our B units was 4.7, health insurance almost $900,000. The others are small decreases there based on eliminating funding for the music industry archiving. That was a disregard or was really not asked for by UGA. It was put in by the Senate, and while UGA had worked with the Classic Center to do that, the governor's recommendation did not include that this year, nor the $92,500 for the Georgia Aviation Hall of Fame in that regard either. And the one-time funds for the Georgia Research Alliance of 1.25 was also for a eminent scholar that is in the base budget there. So that's a simple presentation of our budget needs. We also wanted to provide you and remind you, the committee, that 20 out of 26 institutions are having less students and less money than the year before. I told you earlier, that's not altogether bad, because that forces us to make good decisions and better decisions, but it does, at the end of the day, take away from the revenue that we're having. I noticed that President Riley mentioned about, from the Hope Scholarship over the previous tuition and the current tuition, we hope those to be the same. That's our Board of Regents is committed toward affordability as much as anything else, reducing student debt, and providing the best value for our Georgia students in tuition. So it's our desire that we continue the zero tuition increase, except where consolidation provided maybe two sectors, where there is an access mission and a university mission. There are different credit hour earnings on that, and we'll look and talk with the Board of Regents how reconciling and synchronizing some of that may take place when there are dual sector missions at one institution. But other than that, our goal is to continue to remain affordable for our students going forward. But it's, as you may know, the inflationary factors eat into that opportunity. That's why I wanted you to have that M&O sheet showing you what is really earned from the formula, which is, once again, 40 years old, and what we're actually feel like we're expending on M&O fees that way as well. And we did make a request of the governor, even for a $1 increase in M&O would be $44 million. And if you all find that you find some funds in the budget that would do that, we would love to have it redirected toward increasing our M&O earnings, and we could allocate that among our institutions and really decrease a lot of the red ink that they'll have on their campuses this coming year. So that's really a simple request, simple budget this year. Interestingly, only $7.5 million in enrollment growth. That tells you a little bit about what's happening in the system, happening nationwide, honestly. But as I told you in our other budget presentation, we're going to do whatever it takes to continue to provide good educational opportunities for our Georgia students. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chancellor. First, again, that same set of questions we'll ask and get you a copy of. But first of all, any questions from the committee? I know we have two. So, Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor, thank you. You touched on it, the decrease in enrollment in the majority of the institutions. And you said that something about being nationwide. I've heard some talk of this, and
Right.
particularly talk of schools up north coming down south to recruit a lot more because they have even less students than we do, I've been told. But what is your analysis of what's going on there and what the future looks like?
Well, Representative Fleming, it is a very competitive environment, particularly not even for those up in the Midwest, but also our neighboring states as well. And there are a lot of deals being done, particularly to the west in that way. If you read something recently about the University of Alabama essentially doing away with out-of-state tuition and those kind of things, they're aggressively recruiting our Georgia students in that regard, and it's a challenge. The workforce is also a challenge when you have 2 jobs available for every person out there that's of working age. Then many of these young people, these traditional students, had rather take that $20 or $25 an hour job than go to school. Our goal is it doesn't have to be an either or, it can be both. So we're obviously trying to meet them where they are with more available online courses, opportunities for them to invest that value in themselves while they're also taking advantage of a job right out of high school in that regard. So demographically, there are just less high school graduates than there had been for a fairly significant number, but that'll be with us for a while. Many people talk about the cliff that's coming in 25 or 26. What we're doing now is trying to realign and readjust and prepare for not a growth environment, which had been with us for 20 years, but for a flat or either decreasing number environment going forward.
And I'll be brave enough or stupid enough to ask the next question, I guess. At one time, we went through a series of consolidations of our schools in the university system. Is this decline going to make us re-examine some of those methods again, maybe?
We're not there yet. Some of our institutions have a limited number of students, and they're kind of their bare bones, and we have to really truly define what is the critical limit of constitutes a college or a university. But we don't see us there yet. We don't have any. There's been no conversation about any other kind of mergers or consolidations at this point. We're trying to digest the ones that we had in 2015 from our access colleges, both in Georgia State and Augusta and Georgia Southern and others, in order to just get the perceived value that we could have got from the consolidations in that point and working through those.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions, for Chancellor? Chairman Martin.
Chairman, I'll be brief, and my apologies. I was waiting on a meeting over there at 1:15 that apparently is going to occur tomorrow at 1:15. It was on my account, so I apologize.
Your calendar sounds like mine.
So, Mr. Chancellor, so going back that with the decrease in enrollment, I know we're doing something at certain universities because the Board of Regents has seen it in the wisdom for economics of scale to do some border tuition type waivers things. So that in conjunction, and I'm building a question here, that in conjunction with the right size, and we had talked about previously that you had done since your arrival there, it is, at least in your opinion for now, it is leading us to be as efficient as we can, because at some point if you cut down below a certain number, you no longer get your economics of scale at a university in a classroom. So I bet to these the border waiver type thing, it allows us to continue to provide educational opportunities to Georgians and to folks that come over and we hope stay at a economically at our best economic terms. Is that a fair?
It is. That challenge of the balance that you ask really goes back to the question of Representative Fleming of how do we actually balance that? What is the sustainable model for a university or college to be called a college, and what is the right ratio of administration, faculty, and students in that regard? I do think the borderline waivers are important. They all are essentially reciprocal because they are draining our Georgia students as well fairly aggressively from some states in that regard. I'm concerned and really doing a deep dive over our net out-migration of 7,000 Georgia students going less than we're bringing in. So we're looking to find out where that is going, where that leakage is occurring, and what we can do to stem it and even recruit more from out of state in there. There's also a really paradigm shift, as you all know. The pandemic led us in a lot of online classes. Many students, while many prefer in-person classes, many also prefer online classes, and this also gives them the opportunity to work in a job and have more freedom to do that as they determine for theirs. So we're trying to meet students where they are in that regard.
Let's make sure. Chairman Martin, are you?
Yes.
All right. All right. Chairman Chokus.
Chancellor, as you know, I represent South Georgia, and Georgia Southwestern State University is in my district. And we've benefited from the tuition waivers for out-of-state students. We've had desks that were empty, and we filled them up with that. But we also know that the economy is changing, and that the degrees that we're offering today, are they meeting the needs of industry for now and the future? Or what do we need to be looking at as far as degree programs for the 2 years out, 3, 5, 10 years out?
Great question. Obviously, how do you prepare students for jobs of the future? That's
Yes,
on
sir.
our mind all the time. They're ever evolving. Many of the jobs that we're graduating students from today weren't even in a thought 10 years ago. So
That's correct.
we have to stay ahead of that curve. One way we're doing that, it really is surveying our employers, those modern companies there, of what their employment needs are. We're looking at job postings about what that is. Any new program that we propose in our university system has to have a workforce component to it. What are the jobs there in order to justify a new program that way, as well as we are also eliminating previous programs that do not have a current market force workforce need in them as well.
And do you think by staying on top and ahead of this curve, if follow up, if that's okay, that we'll be able to maybe turn around the decreases in enrollment and maybe bring back some of those 7,000 students that went out of the state?
Well, that's our challenge, obviously. That's part of our structure in order to do that and to right-size the programs, but also get those degree programs that they may not be able to get elsewhere, utilize the branding that we have here from our flagships, Georgia Tech, University of Georgia, but also Kennesaw, West Georgia, Valdosta, Georgia Southern, and our other network of colleges and universities in order to do that. But the demographics obviously is swimming against the tide right now. But in this one, when we want to do this forensic dive into what are the reasons that we're having a net out-migration of 7,000 students, to help us understand how we resolve that and reverse that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Chancellor, thank you. I think there's been some good questions that have been asked. I know that you and the USG are looking at this. Obviously of concern, you and I have spoken about, maybe meeting the needs and our purpose or realignment. I know after realignment, be careful with my words, the mission of our universities and the concern about, decreasing student numbers, especially in some of our rural areas, and certainly with COVID, the issues surrounding, doing away with entry requirements and seeing, again, what that mix of students are and how they're shifting and what we're seeing from that. I think that's a good question as we go forward. I know you're looking into a lot of those issues as to why we're headed down this path and, what are the recent issues that we've seen in the last couple of years with these universities. So I look forward to speaking with you more on that. And again, we will have questions, those same questions from President Riley. We will get those out to
Be happy
you.
to answer those.
And but we appreciate what you've done as you come in, and I guess the renewed energy and focus and passion that you have for higher education is really exciting to see what you've done. And we look forward to working with you and the USG as we continue to make this state the best it can be, especially in higher education.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've heard me say before, and I truly believe that as higher education goes in the state follows a generation or two later. So we can't afford to get behind that curve, and we'll do everything we could. Even for those institutions that have less money the year before, we're going to do whatever it takes to maintain the quality and the availability and the affordability for students across the country.
Thank you, Chancellor.
Thank you, sir.
Our next presenter is Commissioner Greg Dozier from the Technical College System.
Mr. Chairman, committee, thank you for the opportunity to talk about our 2024 budget. I did want to start, and I'm so thankful Chairman Gaines came back in. Wanted to start with the just excitement around the Super Bowl last night of having Miss Fabergé Flint, who is one of our managers at Athens Tech, who was the honorary captain and a Pat Tillman recipient, do the coin toss. So that was a lot of excitement around our system, and we thank her for her leadership at Athens Tech, but we also thank her for her sacrifice. She lost her husband in the Iraqi Freedom War, and it was a great honor to see her last night do that. We are in section 46 of your tracking sheet. Each of the divisions will have, just like everyone's budget, the first four items include the $2,000 pay raise. When you look at that as a whole for our agent, it's just over $11.5 million. The other three items, the merit system assessment, the TeamWorks, and the DOAS billings, represents a little over $1.6 million. So I'll skip those, Mr. Chairman, in each of those areas and go to the new items that are not consistent. The first new item is in the fourth section, 46.4, and it's the last item in that section, 46.4.5, and that's to remove one-time money for the design of an electric vehicle facility. That's the $6.25 million that was put in last year for one of the two training facilities related to Rivian and Hyundai. You'll remember in the amended budget, an additional $6.25 million was put in, and construction dollars were put in for both the facilities. The House removed construction money for one of them and said that you guys would address it in the big budget. So that's just kind of a reminder that we have that lingering in the big budget as we move forward, depending on what the Senate does with that item. As you move to the next new item, it's in the technical education program, 46.5. If we'll drop down to 46.5.5, it recognizes the reduction in our formula. That's a reduction of $8.9 million, which represents $9.2 million, which is 3.5% reduction in our credit hours, just over 64,000 credit hours, and then a slight increase in our square footage rate of 2.1%. The next item is 46.5.6, which is a reduction of one-time monies for Southeast Georgia Technical College. That money was put in last year, $500,000 to do some one-time beautification of that campus, so it's being removed. And on the last page, under Workforce Development, 46.6, we have two new items related to the, one related to the EV world, which is to increase funds for the customized recruitment of $897,150. That's basically the customized recruiting related to the Hyundai project. And the last item is a transfer of monies from One Georgia Authority in the amount of $250,000. TCSG's been receiving that grant for a number of years. That goes to our colleges that are around bases to help train those who are coming out of the military and back into our communities. Mr. Chairman, those are the items in our budget this year. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Members of the committee, questions? Chairman Martin.
Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. Workforce is certainly a hot topic around the hill this session, and it has been focused on in previous. But can you give us an idea what that will do? I mean, what is the 897? Can you kind of give us an order of magnitude of what impact that would have, or maybe not the final outcome, but
Right.
what it looks like?
Yeah, so the $800,000 goes toward the unit of employment services, the Title III section of Department of Labor that was transferred last session into TCSG. This money will be dedicated toward Hyundai when they come in to do recruitment of finding those new staff they need for that facility when they come in. So it'll be a host of sending out flyers, responding to individual folks looking for jobs, doing a lot of workforce capture for that new industry as it walks in.
So is that budget, if I may, just to follow up and try to understand that further, so that money's budgeted to you through workforce development, and then you work with the Department of Labor to implement it, or is it,
So
am
just
I
a
hearing that
reminder-
backwards?
Yeah, just a reminder that employment services used to be part of Department of Labor. Last year through the General Assembly, it moved over to TCSG. So this is new to our agency, but it'll be retained here, and obviously we'll work with labor, but we have the unit now that will actually provide those services.
Okay, thank you for the reminder of that.
Yes,
That's
sir.
what I was after, is the connection back to labor, but we did, I do recall now with your help placing there. I'd just off to, further on with other workings that we're doing with workforce, I'd love to get into that further. It's not a
Absolutely.
question, Mr. Chairman, of the funds for the budget, but just how to work a little more hand in glove with them to best use our human capital and
Absolutely.
state treasurer.
Look forward to working
I'd
with
like
you.
to be a part of that conversation too, Chairman. It's very important. Members of the committee. You, all right, Chairman Choke is.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. I appreciate it. It's good for you to talk to us. Do you have any figures that you could share with the committee with full-time instructors and adjunct instructors, what the percentage is?
I can give you round numbers. We have somewhere around 6,000 full-time positions when you look at our technical colleges as a whole. To give you an idea of those 6,000, about 3,000 are state funded and about 3,000 are funded with tuition fees grants. We have an additional 6,000 adjuncts, and that comes and goes based on need and demand. So in total, you have somewhere around 12,000 employees when you include all of them.
And 50%
Yes, sir.
are full-time and 50% are adjunct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Approximately. I can
Thank
get you the exact, but that's approximate.
Commissioner, I think that's a good segue into these questions, and again, we may go through them, and I know
Yeah.
a little more time to put some data behind them, but I think it's especially relevant in regards to our technical college system. We're looking at, due to the decrease in credit hours, $9.2 million, basically a decrease in, I guess, the formula. But how are we doing this? We're putting more and more ask, if you will, on the technical college system, workforce development. And the technical college is so very uniquely situated to meet a lot of these asks that we're statewide we're looking at. But in this budget, we're sitting here and we've had discussions from last year about the 5,000. This year we're doing the 2,000. So again, I'll ask the question, and again, with detailed answers, but you may be able to touch on it. Does the money included in this proposed budget for the 2,000 COLA adequately fund all of your agency?
The 2,000 only funds the state-funded portion of the numbers I gave you just a minute ago. So when you look at the 15, I'm sorry, I'm blank on my number here. When you look at the $11.5 million that are recommended in this budget, that funds the $2,000 pay raise for the state-funded positions, which is about 3,000 employees.
And so we have another 3,000 that then you have to come out of your own budget somewhere.
And to give you an idea, Mr. Chairman, that's about $9 million that our technical colleges are having to balance as they bring in the tuition fees and others. They have to take those monies and balance the operations to cover that $2,000. Yes, sir.
That's I know Chairman Martin may have another question related to this. Chairman Martin.
I don't want to take the chair's time and then the time of the committee to get into this, but so just to picture this correctly is when you say state-funded positions, that would be the positions we fund as a state. These are there day in, day out, and then the additional positions you're talking about funded that you fund with tuition. I mean, I get back to the, from our friends down in Columbus, Aflac. It's cash, just like money.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean to be flippant about it, but it is. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're funding it with tuition and fees and those sorts of things, that flows through ultimately the state's treasury, and they get a paycheck that says the state of Georgia on it, right?
That's correct.
So I think what we have here, Chairman Knight, is a situation where what's state funded and what's not. I mean, if you get I think most people think if they get a check that where the state of Georgia is their employer, they think they're a state funded employee.
Mm-hmm.
I realize that's a little different, when you come down with some of the federal funds that come down and are hired. But in this particular case, I just watched you break them down, and it's sort of 6,000 or full professor, 6,000 adjunct. Of those, 3,000 or state funded, 3,000. I mean, I think it just begs the question of, and I know the chair's looking at it, but the whole issue of the funding formula at TCSG and the university system. I don't know if the chancellor's still here, but I think we all know that needs to be looked at in 2023 on a more focused level, so that we can pull, we can do this. I mean, it's a bit of a, it's not a shell game. I was about to say that, but I mean, it sort of is. The money's fungible. I mean, they get this money and it goes in the treasury, it comes back out. If we want to have people that work with TCSG to get a raise, we need to fund the raise, in my humble opinion.
Chairman, I think you got some great points. So it's, I think this is something that, yeah. I think maybe more than a couple. No, you've got a few more good points, I think, left in this session. But, that speaks to, again, Commissioner, we've had some discussions, but, head counts, vacancies. And, when we're sitting here trying to meet these workforce needs in a lot of these areas where we need the people from industry.
That's right.
We're competing with industry for salaries, but, we're sitting here with 6,000, adjunct, if you will, part-time faculty members teaching. How is that affecting the quality of what we're doing and the competition that we need to have to compete for these industry professionals who can come in and again teach that next generation, who will go out and then fulfill our workforce needs. Can you speak to vacancies and head counts?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll have to follow up with you on the global vacancies. I can tell you from a system office approach, we're looking at about 18% turnover, which is extremely high, just like most entities today, compared to what we were 2 years ago. I can tell you anecdotally that you're spot on as far as the skill set of those needed instructors, whether it's aviation, whether it's nursing, whether it's welding. The opportunities right now make it extremely hard to keep great instructors with opportunities that are available. Therefore, as we look at the salaries and things of that nature, it puts a demand on our presidents to figure out how to keep great talent and still maintain the budget. So it's something that's a real issue that our presidents do an incredible job of trying to maintain and manage, while at the same time recruit and find new students. It's a tough one.
We've put a lot on you without, again, we need to make sure that the system is able to handle.
Yes, sir.
And complete its task as we put more and more responsibilities on you. Two more quick questions, and you've heard them, but capital needs that aren't funded in this budget. Are there specifics that you know that this committee would be interested in?
And so we've, as you know, in the capital budget, we have a fairly simple recommendation this year. It's $8 million for obsolete equipment. It's the furniture, fixtures, and equipment for 4 projects that were funded last year, and then $19 million for a facility at Ogeechee Tech, which is a robotics facility. Each of our colleges have a approved project that's approved by the state board, and I believe we've submitted it to the House budget, and obviously want to make sure you have that. But all of those projects have been vetted by the agency, by the state board, and are great projects for the future of our workforce. So we would obviously support all of those.
Okay. Last question, and again, I don't know there's an answer right now, but again, fees that are collected that cover any of your operations for your for the system that we don't appropriate. If you have those, we would appreciate some information on how much and then specific to their use. We'd certainly appreciate that.
Just thank you for that question. We'll get it specifically to you. We do a pretty good job of appropriating most of it, but there's always a difference, so we'll get you that difference. Okay. When you look at our funding stream, and I love Chairman Martin's comment about you operate on a global budget, not just one fund source, and that's really how we see it. But we get just over $400 million from the state appropriation. But we also get almost an equal amount in fees, student tuition and fees. But we also get some money from Perkins as far as federal dollars coming in. We also have, as I mentioned on the workforce side, Title I money that goes toward training and Title III money that goes toward employment services. Most all of that is appropriated, but obviously as it comes in, it shores up and it changes toward the end, but we'll get you the exact details on all those.
We'd appreciate it. And obviously I think you've, again, thank you for what you do. Think the technical college system in Georgia, the vital role that you play in the state's economic prosperity that we've so much enjoyed, obviously a great record, but we want to make sure that we help our system, again, look at what your needs are to make sure that they're adequate to fulfill those requests and a lot of asks that we've made of the technical college system. So thank you, and we will look forward to working with you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
On
Appreciate
these
your support.
issues. Thank you. right, our next presenter, we're going to have Chuck Burke and Rusty Paul come up, and they're going to do a short presentation. How are you doing?
I am delightful. Thank you. Mr. Chairman and committee, I want to thank you for the opportunity to present. For the last about 15 years, the city of Sandy Springs has hosted the Anne Frank exhibit and the Georgia Commission on the Holocaust in Sandy Springs. My predecessor her father was a judge in Germany when Hitler came to power, and he was one of the first people to lose his job. And he took his family to Italy because he could see what was coming. When then came along Mussolini, and so he had to get his family out of Italy. And they came to Georgia. He ended up teaching Spanish at the University of Georgia, a language he didn't know, but he taught himself on the boat over and walked into a classroom. And then her husband was in the exact same concentration camp that Anne Frank and her family were in. And he was the only surviving member of his family, came to the United States, went to medical school, was a physician and a gastroenterologist, taught at Emory University, one of the most respected physicians. And so when Eva Galambos found the Anne Frank exhibit in another part of the state that was just kind of languishing, she brought it into Sandy Springs, and we've housed it for the last 15 years or so. In 2018, the legislature passed a bill asking the Holocaust Commission to raise funds for a Holocaust memorial in the state of Georgia. And because we were already hosting the Anne Frank exhibit and their offices were in spaces that we provided, the city provided, we decided we wanted to work with the commission to bring that to Sandy Springs. We have been subsidizing the Anne Frank exhibit and the commission about $50,000 a year out of our own resources to help them keep this operation going. So we've decided to, in working with the commission, the city is donating a $4 million piece of property at its own expense, building a between $6 and $8 million building to house their offices and to house the exhibit. And I'm going to ask Mr. Burke to come up and tell you what we plan to go in there. And our goal is to get that project underway shortly and hopefully be in the fiscal 2020. My goal is to make sure we're in there in the fiscal 24 session. So what we're asking, as far as we know, this is the only state agency that does not get any rent money from the state of Georgia. We're donating the land, we're donating the building. All we're asking the General Assembly to do is provide some rent money to make sure that, one, is a show of good faith to the city that you appreciate what we're doing for the state. Secondly, my council is saying, why in the world are we doing this if the state's not going to help us? So that's kind of what our ask is, and I'm going to ask Mr. Burke to come forward and just kind of carry you quickly through what we plan to put in this facility and see what a bargain you're going to get if you fund it, and then we'll be available for any questions.
Thank you, Rusty, and Chairman and members. This is, I will say it, and I usually don't get too excited about something, but this is going to put for Georgia a world-class facility in here, something that no other state has. And I'm going to tell you about some of the exhibits that we're going to have here. First of all, there's going to be 7 exhibits. One of the exhibits is about Anne Frank and all of her family and the people who stayed in that hidden place for 761 days. It's being manufactured for us by the Anne Frank House. Ron Leopold, who heads that up, is now a friend of ours. This is going to be one of the only facilities in the entire world that'll have this as a permanent exhibit. That's just one exhibit. The second thing is, there's many people, most Georgians, will never have the opportunity to get to Amsterdam to be able to see the Anne Frank House. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring that here. We're actually going to build life-size the actual rooms that Anne Frank and all these people lived in. So all of these people are going to be able to see what Anne Frank and what these people, where they live for 700. It's only 540 square feet. That's where they lived. So that's the second thing that we're going to do. The third thing is there's a lot of Georgia survivors and liberators. And so we have written in oral and video testimonies from a lot of these people. So we're going to have a special exhibit just on survivors and liberators. Now, one of the things that you probably from your history, you probably knew that Eisenhower, when he came upon the first concentration camp, couldn't believe his eyes. He couldn't believe that anybody could do anything so horrendous. And he said, you know what, you better take pictures of everything that you do, because at some point people are going to deny that this could have possibly happened. And one of the people who did that was an African American by the name of William Alexander Scott III, who became a prominent Georgian. And he was a photographer. He was actually in a segregated unit. He was a sergeant. And he came upon, Buchenwald, and what he did is he was one of the people who took photographs of a lot of these things. So we're going to have a special exhibit on him. Now, one of the things that's also important for us, because most of the people who come into these exhibits are not Jews. It's 95% of the people who come in are of other faiths, and most of the people who are coming in are students. We're going to have students from all over the state coming in. And when you look at a lot of the diverse communities, a lot of the blacks and a lot of the Latinos who come in, they look at Anne Frank, this 14-year-old girl, and they identify with them, and that's like their entree into learning about this history. And so we're going to have students from all over the state coming in here, very important, learning about this. Now, that's just the third one. The fourth exhibit, one of the most common questions you get when you have students come into this, they say, well, geez, didn't anybody know about this? How come you didn't do anything? Now they can call Alexa, they can ask Google, and they find stuff out instantaneously. Well, we're going to have a special exhibit. It's called What Do Americans Know and What Did Georgians Know? And it shows you the actual newspapers, the magazines, the video, the media that will tell people what was actually going on then. Now that in itself, that's just 4 of the exhibits. That's going to bring a tremendous amount of people in. But the 5th exhibit is one which is, to me, it's unbelievable. The Steven Spielberg Shoah Foundation out in California, we're working closely with them. You may have seen this on 60 Minutes, by the way. They brought some survivors into some highly sophisticated studio, and they sat them there for hours and hours and hours. They asked them every conceivable question that the chairman might ask, that Chuck might ask, any one of you might ask, and kids. And then through the magic of AI and virtual reality, we're going to have a huge TV screen there. You're going to be able to have a survivor up on that screen, and you can ask them any question you want, and they'll answer you. Now, the most impactful learning that comes from learning about this is to actually talk to a survivor. But unfortunately, most of these survivors are gone. Only a few of them are left. And so we're going to have an opportunity for, in perpetuity, be able to talk to survivors. The last two, I'll finish with this, is Anne Frank used to look out her window, and she used to see this beautiful chestnut tree. It was one of the things that sort of gave her hope. And she'd see the birds, and she would see it leaf out in the spring. Well, unfortunately, that tree got diseased. They thought it had died, but it has shot up with some sprouts. And they've been able to propagate those into trees and award them to very special places. One of them's at the White House. One of them's at the Clinton Library, where we are going to be awarded the actual tree, the actual chestnut tree that Anne Frank used to look at, and we'll create a garden outside with a statue of Anne Frank. It'll be a reflective area. And the last exhibit that we'll have is probably the most important, because once people learn about this, that's one thing. But we wanted to know, what do you do with it afterwards? And basically what we want to teach them, and Sally Levine, who's our executive director, is going to be developing this, is what are your roles and responsibilities in a democratic society? Because what we've learned and what people know is that genocide does not start in a thriving democracy. And so we want to teach them about that. As Sally says many times, most of the damage that was done was not by Nazis with a capital N. It was done by ordinary people, like people in this room, unfortunately. People who either helped them and assisted them or did nothing and just looked the other way. And so what we want to do is teach them about what you should be doing, what we all should be doing to make sure nothing like this happens again. The last thing I'll leave you with is this. We want to be able to, this will be something that shows that Georgia stands up against hate, against racism, against anti-Semitism, stands up for respect, for tolerance, for human rights. And it's going to be a phenomenal exhibit. You know, I was very successful in my business career over the years. I was responsible for hundreds of millions of dollars. I hired all kinds of people. But at some point, when my grandkid is going to be sitting on my knee and they're going to say, Papa, you know, what did you accomplish in your life? I'm going to say, this is the most important thing that I've been involved with, because I really think this is going to be phenomenal for Georgia and for our students. So thank you.
Let me close with this. You may have read last weekend in Sandy Springs, we woke up to some of the most vile literature I have ever seen in my life, laying in the driveways of our community. So how do you defeat hate? It's through education. One of the great things is that this virtually every 8th grade student reads the Anne Frank diary. And we are creating a situation where these students can come in and take that diary and really see what the impact of that kind of thinking, that kind of hate leads to. And the only way we get rid of it is by educating our children when they're absorbing all this information. And that's what we're trying to do. And we want this to be a beacon that says these are what Georgia's values are. As I said, the city of Sandy Springs stepped up, and all we're doing is just a little bit of help get us there. Thank
Well, I
you.
appreciate it.
Ask there any questions that you may have.
Well, we may have some questions for committee. One, I want to, my friend Chairman Deborah Silcox, I want to thank her for what she's done. She has absolutely been relentless as far as, making sure that we are aware that this is the only state commission that we're not funding, if you will, right now, which into itself is a travesty. I want to thank you, Chairman Silcox, for what you're doing and your how you're advocating for this, and I think it is very important. You know, I had an opportunity some years ago to go up and see the Holocaust Memorial Museum in D.C., and I don't think until you can read history books, you can go over things, but until you actually see history and you actually can almost touch it and smell it and feel it and really understand what happened and the travesty against humanity, that happened during that reign of Germany and what happened in Germany, that was just absolutely unconscionable. And I think that, again, history, to your point, until people really understand and are educated about what happened, we're bound to repeat history. And I think what you're doing is commendable. And I personally look forward to making sure that we're a partner, as we should be, going forward with the museum. And I want to thank you, Mayor, for what y'all have done to already contribute and put in more than your fair share of, to the commission. And I look forward to seeing a final building and a final the exhibits if you've seen. So.
Well, one thing we forgot to tell you, they've raised $4 million for these exhibits.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been out working, we've been out working, so we appreciate anything you can do for us.
Yeah, we've raised $4 million. We're on our way to $6.5 million. Matter of fact, we had 2 pledges this past week for $50,000 each. So we've got a lot of citizens who are also feel the same way.
That is awesome, and I think we should as a state. Real quick, I want to make sure we don't have any questions from the committee. Any comments, questions from the committee? Thank you all very much, and I really appreciate y'all coming today and enlightening the committee on this very worthwhile project.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity.
Thank you. Where's our next presentation will be from Middle Georgia State University. I think President Blake, I'll let you sort of open it up, if you will, and maybe introduce the folks that are here. But Again, as we look at last year, there were some initiatives that this committee took as we start to address probably one of the largest industries in Georgia, and some special initiatives that we took, and we want to hear all about those initiatives and where we've come from last year, how far we've come from last year. President Blake?
Well,
the floor
thank you,
is yours.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members. My name is Chris Blake. I have the honor of serving as the president. And really, we just want to give a report. Our Dean of Aviation, Mr. Aidan Clark, is on my right. He will give an overview of the work that we're currently doing and have been doing in aviation. I do want to say this, that it's because of the support we have had and that you have championed and been able to resource for us that we have seen an extraordinary 10 years in the School of Aviation. It has become one of our largest schools. Our enrollment there has grown from about 350 students 10 years ago to now over 1,300. And we continue to see this is an industry, Georgia's second largest industry, that we can help serve. The funds that you have been able to find for us have been directly related to student experience and student success. The employment of those students is something that the industry is extremely keen to sustain. And so today we are here and glad to be here to talk about what I think is a proud story, but also one that has a great future and continues to have an opportunity for expansion. So with that, I'm going to hand over now to my colleague, Mr. Aidan Clark, Dean of the School of Aviation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, President Blake. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. Get this on. Just give you a brief overview of the School of Aviation at Middle Georgia State University. We're one of only 13 universities in the country offering a 4-year degree with flight training associated with it. And then we're one of only 9 universities in the country offering what we call the 3 pillars of aviation. So that's flight training, aircraft maintenance training, and air traffic control training. And you can kind of see some of the salaries associated with those according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Those are from this past year. And then you can see our graduation rate. Obviously, our flight program is our largest program, 57.4% graduates there, 38.3% in the maintenance and structural program, and then 4.3% in the air traffic control program. So, as Dr. Blake mentioned, our enrollment has grown exponentially, and you can see in the last 5 years we've had a 200% growth in enrollment. I'd like to attribute that to my great leadership, but quite honestly, it's a workforce need. You know, the industry needs these folks, so they're coming to school to get the training that they need, the education and training they need to go into the workforce. Our fleet, we have 52 aircraft. That includes 4 helicopters. Last year we run about 25,000 hours on those aircraft. So as you can see, those aircraft are accumulating hours rapidly, which requires replacement in addition to trying to grow the fleet in order to grow the enrollment numbers as well. So you can see, talking about workforce development, more than 80% of our School of Aviation graduates live and work within a 100-mile radius of Macon, Georgia. And you can kind of see the top counties that we serve over on the left, the top 10 counties that we serve at the School of Aviation. Obviously, we serve 111 counties in Georgia, but those are our top numbers. You can see some of our partners there. That's not all of them. We actually have a meeting coming up in, not this week, but next week with United Airlines. United Aviate has reached out to us, and they're interested in potentially partnering with us, and that's a program similar to our Delta Propel program. So we're looking forward to that. It just gives our graduates another opportunity for another major airline pathway. This slide right here is probably of particular interest to you and the committee as it relates to the line item. So if you look with that line item, we were able to increase our stage check exams, and that's as a flight student moves through their training, they have certain stages that they complete, stage 1, stage 2, depending on whatever they're in. So the stage check exams, they have to have an exam by a stage check examiner. That we were able to increase our stage check numbers, which increased those exams up to 144%. We increased flight hours 20%. Our graduation rate was up 65%. That's all due to, now that's a twofold process. Clearly, our enrollment has grown, which contributed to the increase in graduates. But if we grow the enrollment without the ability to fund it, we don't get them in and out as quickly as possible. So that line item directly contributed to that 65% increase in graduation rate. We've also been reaching out around the state to college and career academies, and we're looking to expand that, not to just college and career academies, but K-12 units that do not currently have a college and a career academy associated with it. That's a way that we can economically bring flight training to local communities without having the infrastructure and the aircraft associated with that. We can do some of the prerequisite courses that they offer there to lead them into the flight program. We also have the potential to do maintenance training as a satellite unit at some of these places. So they would do some of the intro general subject areas for the FAA, general subject areas at these locations once they get approved by the FAA. And then they would all transfer to Middle Georgia State University to finish up their degree. But it does a couple of things. It gets them interested earlier in an aviation industry that is struggling to find talent. It gets them interested early. It saves them money on the front end, which saves them money on the back end. So we're pretty excited about that opportunity to expand throughout the state there. And that's all I have. If you have any questions, I blew through it pretty quick, but most of you are familiar with our program. But just want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about it and for the support and the line item that we've got.
Well, Dean Clark, I want to thank you. You know, this committee took up a mission as we started to do a deeper dive into aviation in Georgia. I think we learned a lot over the last 2 years, and again, as you heard, aviation is the second largest industry in Georgia, and it's so vital to our state, not only from the partners that you saw from manufacturing, but the world's busiest airport, our Air Force bases, our other manufacturers like Lockheed Martin. There's ag crop duster manufacturers in Southwest Georgia. So Georgia is a very, very intensive aviation state. Its economy is very much benefits from this industry. And as we look at some of the needs there and this demographic of retiring, you know, either aviators or the A&P mechanics that keep these the aircraft airworthy and flying, we're seeing a demand that is just very great. Not only in the state, but we're seeing it nationally and globally. And I for one appreciate what we've done here at Middle Georgia within the aviation program. You know, as we heard the chancellor and we started talking about the decline in enrollment. Well, this is where we're excelling. We're meeting a workforce need of our state. But I want to go back to excelling and the quality of what we're doing. This program that we have at Middle Georgia State is by far probably one of the best, if not on its way to being the #1 aviation program in the United States. And I appreciate what you've done. One, I want to say thank you for the wise use of what we have budgeted. I've gotten to know the dean, and he's very squeaky, conservative, tight with funds, and he's going to make every last penny count. But I think that's evident through the numbers that we're seeing here, the increased graduation rate, and that's exactly what we wanted out of that line item, was to see the low-hanging fruit of increased graduation, increased workforce, folks entering the workforce. So I really appreciate it. But any questions from the committee? I know some of our districts out there, we've got some pilots. Please, you've got the dean. Now's the time to make a comment or question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and well said, extremely well said. The industry is vital to our state, and I don't have as much of a question as much of a statement that the airline industry is not new to the state of Georgia. And I am proud to say that Sutherfield and South Georgia Tech is where Charles Lindbergh bought his first airplane and learned how to fly. And it's been, we've had a continuous operation airport, one of the oldest in the world. There ain't but two. We're on the Western Hemisphere, and there's one in France. So kudos to you for what you're doing. Continue. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that focus. Thank you.
Chairman. Any other questions, comments? The committee. Dean Clark, thank you. President Blake, thank you for what you're doing. This is indeed a bright spot as we look at the university system and where we're actually growing and fulfilling that need. I think you're leading the way there, and I look forward to more discussions on how we can continue to help.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was reminded by my colleague back here that this fall we heard Chancellor Perdue talk about a lot of enrollment declines across universities. Our enrollment increase for this past fall for the School of Aviation was 9.9%. So we're growing, and that's where you guys come in to enable us to continue that growth pattern. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, our final presentation day, and I'm going to ask everyone we only have one more very important presentation. You will stick around. We're going to hear from Mercer University, and if President Underwood would come up, and Dr. Elkins, would you please come up? We're going to hear regarding the scholarship, regarding the engineering scholarship out of Mercer. And I've asked Mercer to come in and maybe give us some more of a background or history of this scholarship. It's where it started, its purpose, because I think we want to make sure we understand clearly history, if you will, of that scholarship and what its original mission was, and make sure that we're still on track in fulfilling that mission. So, Dr. Underwood, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee. It's a privilege to be here. My name is Bill Underwood. I've been the president at Mercer for 17 years now. My colleague, Dr. Penny Elkins, is our senior vice president for enrollment management. She oversees student recruitment, financial aid, and very importantly, student retention. She is also our liaison with the largest industrial employer in the state of Georgia, which is the Robbins Air Logistics Center in Warner Robins. And that leads into a little bit of history for you about this program. Our School of Engineering dates to the mid-1980s. It came into being because of Robbins Air Logistics Center. The base commander at that time was General Newt Nuterin, and he feared that unless they could establish a reliable pipeline of engineers for the base, that the base would not survive the next BRAC. And so it was very important to him that we establish this supply of engineers. He initially approached the university system and was unsuccessful in establishing an engineering program there in Middle Georgia. So he came to my predecessor and asked him if Mercer would consider doing it. He had a number of members of the General Assembly with him when he made that request. And ultimately, after studying it, we founded the School of Engineering. It would not exist solely to serve the base, but that was the motivating reason for its founding. The scholarship for engineering education was part and parcel of this effort. It was a scholarship program that really is set up as a loan that can be forgiven through service. The purpose for that scholarship program was to help attract young people interested in engineering into Middle Georgia. It would provide an avenue for the base to recruit those students while they were with us, and they've been very successful in doing that. The way the program works is that a Georgia student, you have to be a student from Georgia to qualify for this scholarship, receives up to $3,500 a year in a forgivable loan, and that's for up to 5 years. So the maximum amount that can be received is $17,500. The average student ultimately receives about $13,000 under this scholarship program. They repay that money through service as an engineer in the state of Georgia. If a recipient who receives the scholarship does not remain in Georgia, the money has to be repaid with interest, and the interest rate set in the program is prime plus 1%. As I said, the goal was to bring bright and talented engineering students into the middle of the state. The goal was for this to be an extremely cost-effective program. The state would get an engineer or it would get its money back, one of the two. And I will tell you that the program has been extraordinarily effective. We attract bright and talented engineering students through this program. The most recent data we have is the average student comes in with an average high school GPA of about 3.97, an average SAT score in about the 91st percentile of college-bound seniors. So these are bright and talented people who are coming to study engineering. The C recipients stay in Georgia. Dr. Elkins will show the next slide we have. That's the most recent two graduating classes that we've audited. The graduating class of 2020, the graduating class of 2021. It shows that 87.1% of the C recipients who have completed their college work have remained here in Georgia. That's an extraordinarily high retention rate. Our data also shows that 97% of the C recipients do what they promise to do. They either practice engineering in Georgia or they repay the money with interest. The graduation rates in this program are extraordinarily high. The students who began in 2016 graduated with a rate of 76.92%. That's from engineering. That means they've completed advanced calculus and physics and all the requirements for engineering and graduated at a rate of 76.92%. The following year, it was 73.87%. Probably a handful of those students are still completing their requirements, and that rate will go up. By the way, the national average for students who enter engineering programs is a 50% completion rate. So these kids graduate at a really high rate with their BSc degree. Robbins is the largest beneficiary of the program. Of those graduates of the C program who are working as engineers in Georgia, over 50% are at Robbins or a Robbins support industry, like the Mercer Engineering Research Center, which is located adjacent to Robbins and does work for Robbins. The C program today is the single largest supplier of entry-level engineers at Robbins. I have an email that we've included from the commanding general at Robbins currently. It's in the packet of materials you see there, but what General Erline is saying is that Mercer University has been at the forefront of their efforts to attract engineering students to Robbins. They recruit engineering students from across the country, but 25% of the engineers at the base, they have between 2,000 and 3,000 engineers at the base. 25% of their engineers are products of this program. So he obviously views this as an extraordinarily important program in terms of their ability to meet their workforce needs at the base. They currently have about 200 open positions for engineers at the base. If you ever hear someone say that we have enough engineers in Georgia, we've got a long list of people to refute that, but they've got 200 existing openings for engineers and would like to have as many as they possibly can. So to summarize my presentation for you, The C program attracts bright and talented Georgia students. It produces high-quality engineers for Georgia who are in high demand. They are the least expensive engineers for taxpayers educated in Georgia. The average C graduate in total over 4 years costs $14,000 for taxpayers. Far and away, the least expensive engineers we graduate in this state. They complete the program at a remarkably high rate. They are retained here at an extremely high rate. The few that are not retained repay their loans. They are the #1 source of entry-level engineers at our largest industrial employer, and Robbins views the program as vital to meeting its workforce needs. So we think it's been an incredibly successful program, and we ask that you all continue to support it as you have for over 30 years.
Thank you, Dr. Underwood. I appreciate your presentation. I know there's been a lot of questions lately in regards to this program. I grew up in my family grew up in Warner Robins. I moved when I was 10 to Griffin, but the base is a really big issue. And I'm before I make too many comments, I know I've got my chairman of Ways and Means is here and lives in Warner Robins. I don't know if he wants to make a few comments in regards to the importance of Robins Air Force Base to that area, and quite frankly, what we need to continue to make sure that base continues to prosper, and anything you could add about BRAC and what we have to do every 6 years? What is it? 6 years? But that may be important for the committee to understand Robins Air Force Base.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm not sure I can say it better than President Underwood's already mentioned it there. We have a $4+ billion industry across Middle Georgia, and what you do is absolutely critical to the missions that come out of Robbins. We see more and more of those jobs moving into that high-tech engineering environment. And you do it with efficiency, and the answer is always yes. So I just want to thank you for being there. I just had a couple of questions. Maybe you can elaborate regarding the program. I mean, most of your students, where do they come from? I mean, I know you said so many of them go to work in Middle Georgia, specifically at Robbins Air Force Base, but.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You want me to use the mic? Okay, I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Mercer is a Georgia institution, so overall, 87% of our students come from the state of Georgia, and 88% of our engineering students come from the state of Georgia. And specifically, if you look at a map of Georgia, you can kind of see that middle Georgia area. There's a huge conglomerate there of students who are coming from middle Georgia, who then, once they enter Mercer University, then we acclimate them to Robbins Air Force Base through internship programs, through research, and they then develop not only an importance, and they understand the importance of Robbins, but they also develop a great affinity for them. You all were talking about workforce needs in almost every single session that we heard before ours, and the fact is, and we all know it, Robbins can't compete with large engineering corporations. They are doing a great job, but in terms of the salary that our military are able to afford for these first-time engineers, I mean, it's highly competitive. So if we don't get them acclimated to the base through this program and through the internships that we're providing for that, that's why we're so successful. And that's why we can say, we have such a high percentage of placement in the state of Georgia, and over half of those engineers who finish their Bachelor of Science in Education degree, just in these two cohorts that we mentioned, are choosing to do that and stay and serve for our U.S. military at that base. It's a real passion for us, and we're glad that we can help provide that need.
Well, it's scary to think what it would be like without you there and answering the call for you know, I guess I repeat myself, but that $4 billion economic engine that we, you know, basically helps run Middle Georgia. Mr. Chairman, is there, I just wondered, are they been called in for any particular reason, or were they here today for, is there some concern about the program, or?
I think there's concern and question in regards to, you know, this mission, and, you know, are they still doing what I think historically they were asked to do, to partner with. And I wanted to make sure that we understood that from a historical perspective, and to make sure that we're continuing to meet that mission and that support specifically of Robins Air Force Base in that Middle Georgia area. So that's why I want to make sure we're here and we all understand this, as certainly questions have come into the Appropriations Committee in regards to, you know, the budget and the line item, and, you know, is this needed in the future? And that's why I want to make sure we hear from Mercer, to make sure we understand historically what they were tasked to do, and to make sure that we're continuing to meet that task. And it's still a vital mission. I would say it is.
You know, I'm glad that, I hope that is abundantly clear. I mean, obviously, I believe that to be the case, but I think, you know, we not only need this particular program, but, you know, if anything, we don't need less of it, we need more of it, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, you make a great point, and to some of the statistics, and I'm going to get to Chairman Martin, he has a question too. But, you know, you said that 25% of these engineers that are either directly for the Air Force Base or right there within that engineering community that's directly supporting the Air Force Base is there, and there's 3,000. I mean, you know, you've basically got, what, 750 base engineers that are constantly, you know, I guess they're supporting this need, and we have 3,000, but again, we've got another 200 openings, 150, 200 openings. So we're still not quenching the thirst of that major employer, so vital to Georgia.
No, and in fact, 25% of their engineers at the base come from this program, and then there are hundreds of other engineers in the surrounding support programs that come from the base. But
so it's 25, let me make sure I'm serious, it's 25% of the actual base engineers.
That's right.
Plus, and again, some history with Warner Robins, but in the base, but you have a lot of the supporting industry that is there, that is the civilian engineers that are contracted with the base supporting those missions, and so that's in addition to just the actual direct employee of Robins Air Force Base.
We hold events for the base commander where he comes onto campus and directly recruits these scholarship recipient students, and recently the base commander arrived and announced that students who would sign up to be at the base upon graduation, he would forgive $30,000 of their loans on the spot. That's how aggressively the base needs these engineers.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm asking this question, I kind of know the answer to it, but I would like for the committee to know, is engineering's hard. We know that. So if a freshman comes in and decides that maybe this isn't for me, what do y'all do? What does Mercer do for that student at that point?
So I'll take that one. Thank you, Chairman
Director
Blackman.
Fonseca.
So if a freshman comes in and they declare engineering as a major, and just like we were talking about our friends at Middle Georgia State, we're talking about the aerospace program. Well, in engineering, it is difficult. So once that freshman hits calculus or physics, they're like, well, maybe I don't want to be an engineer. So that freshman, say they had applied for the scholarship for engineering education. Well, what Mercer does, if they change their major in the first year, and usually a handful of them do, of course, you know, we have about 10%, which means 10 to 12 will change their major in that first year. Mercer will actually cancel that loan with that application for the loan with Georgia Student Finance Commission. That means the state's not paying for that student who just decided they weren't going to be an engineer, nor is that student running up loan debt, because Mercer actually takes that on and scholarships that student so that they are not then having to pay back that $3,500 that they would have acquired that freshman year. So it's a really important part of that. And then once we get them and say, okay, after the freshman year, they settle down, they get through calculus and so forth, then you saw those graduation rates that the president put up of 77%, which was in that 2016 cohort. And many of those are then working in Robbins. Another thing, Chairman Blackman, that you just said that I think Chairman Knight intimated a moment ago is the 200 to 250 openings for engineers at Robbins. You know this, Mr. Chairman, but that's this fiscal year. That's an ongoing, we have to keep replenishing that bucket. And that is why, even with the new mission coming with the ABMS, Advanced Battle Management System mission, we're going to need not just 200 to 250, we're going to need more engineers to support our colleagues at the base.
Thank you. Chairman Martin.
Just real quick, when you talk about we in the base, and you mentioned something about somebody when they walk in, they forgive the loan. We're talking about government employees. I mean, there are military people, obviously, in the Air Force, but many of these are civilian contractors on the base, correct?
Yes. The base, the complex is made up of civilian contractors. Yes.
Right, yeah. So my question there is, in addition, and taking nothing away from you guys being right there, I don't want to do that, but do you go outside? I mean, at some point, your property, plant, and equipment, you can only get so many through the pipeline, right? I mean, you may be close to that, and this is where you invoke Phil Bryant, the former governor of Mississippi. I have to think about how to say this word, collaboration. He uses for competition and collaboration. So I just, as we do this, again, not getting into your the scholarship you have available for Mercer and engineering. But I hope when I hear that there's 200 to fill, that we let folks know around the other engineering schools in the state help us with that and coordinate those private companies with the economy in the area as well.
They absolutely do that. In fact, they recruit engineers everywhere they can find them, in state and out of state, and they've still got that hole to fill.
Well, I was just going by, if you have a private contractor down there that's signing off on $35,000 worth of debt on people, I hope he's jingling the phones at some of our friends down here on North Avenue and at some of the other schools around. So and you're telling me they are working with that.
All of us, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Chairman Chogus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank y'all both for the presentation, and I understand the need. This is kind of a general question, and we heard the Chancellor speak earlier about enrollment growth and enrollment decline. Could you just talk to us a little bit about y'all's enrollment? Is it increasing, decreasing, level, overall?
So we've had 16 years of enrollment increases every year for the last 16 years until this fall, when we had a slight decline of 1.2% in overall enrollment. I'm very pleased that it looks like the spring will catch up and pass that. So enrollment is strong, and I think the reason it is that our strengths tend to be in STEM disciplines, engineering, computer science, medicine, pre-med, and those are fields that are just very attractive to young people. And we have to do that.
Perfect, thank you. And I'm very familiar with the medical program that y'all have in Columbus, because my county, Chattahoochee County, borders Muskogee County, so thank you for that.
Couple of questions, and I know we're running out of time, but I think it's worth asking, because again, I want to make sure that the committee, and we've got testimony on this program so that we can answer questions correctly. You told us about a default rate, 3 to 5% historically. How many students and the number does that represent? And again, if we've gone over it, just reiterate it. And the second part of that question is, you know, how are you trying to offset that, or what have you tried to do to offer in the past to try to get that default rate to zero?
So we.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, you go ahead.
No, we're not in charge with enforcing these, although we're happy to take that on. I will tell you that a 3% default rate is something that any banker would take. It's actually considered a good number. Now, we want that number to be zero, and I think that certainly one thing that can be considered is assigning that responsibility to us. We'd gladly accept it, and might be able to beat that.
And
If you have something to add.
Relates to the presentation that President Riley gave even today. You know, and we were talking about how many programs they actually have to manage. And so to answer your direct question, we have visibility to these students, but when they are at default, meaning they've already missed their payments, and that's when we get the information from our good colleagues who are working very diligently at the Georgia Student Finance Commission. But in terms of monitoring the actual loan forgiveness, it then turns over to the authority, the Georgia Student Finance Authority. And again, we would be most happy, the report that President Riley mentioned in terms of the Scholarship for Engineering Education in her presentation today, she referenced a 2016 report, and even in that report it said that we really need to set some metrics. The Georgia Student Finance Commission would need to set some metrics for this Scholarship for Engineering Education. We would be happy to do that. We would be able to take it on in terms of what you've seen today in terms of graduation, employment metrics, and so forth, and be able to help manage that from a state agency that's really overwhelmed.
Yeah, we'd be glad to do that. And you see the absolute numbers are very small. It's 3, 4, 5 students a year.
Another question. I want to make sure that I understand it and the committee's fully aware. You know, as far as this particular scholarship, we know it's only available to Georgia residents.
That's right.
But do all Georgia resident engineer students apply for this program? Can you delineate, or is there a difference, or they're different?
They do not. Some Georgia residents don't want to commit to remaining in Georgia when they graduate, and so they'll decline to take this scholarship because they want to keep their options open when they graduate. We know that of our engineering students from Georgia who do not enroll in the C program, we have a retention rate of about 50%. So the C program makes a dramatic difference in the retention rate.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. This has been very informative, and I think we'll make sure that we're current on what has happened in the past, and quite frankly, very impressed with how this program continues to meet a need and the numbers of engineers. I know Chairman Martin had mentioned about all the other programs or schools, and I think I want to reiterate from what I've been told in the meetings I've had with different sectors and you know in Georgia. For instance, you know, you've got some of our bigger manufacturing folks on the coast that will take every engineer they can get. Not only the bases, but you've got Lockheed Martin and Gulfstream. In other words, we can't fulfill the need that is out there right now. So, and I think all of our schools, engineering schools, both from the USG side and obviously a program like Mercer is doing the best they can to produce as many engineers as possible to meet Georgia's workforce need. And I don't think that's enough at this point to keep up or put a dent, if you will, in the total amount of engineers needed in Georgia. So
I agree with that. This program is growing, as you can see from the numbers, and we'd like to see it grow more. And we work closely, of course, with other employers, Gulfstream in particular. We do a lot of work with them.
Well, I, for one, I appreciate it. Again, having grown up in the Middle Georgia area, I know the importance of Robins Air Force Base and the need to make sure that we continue to support that base. And I think your engineering program is playing a foundational role in keeping that base where it needs to be. Thank you.
Mr.
Any
Chairman.
other questions from the committee? Seeing none, I want to thank everyone here, and that will conclude our meeting for today. I have learned there's a couple of ways you can draw the short straw in this job, and having the 3 o'clock time session is apparently the short straw. But based on the packed house today, I guess you are all interested in what we have to say. So with that, I will call this Appropriations Subcommittee meeting to order, and we'll call on Chairman Irwin to open us in a word of prayer.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bow your heads, please. Dear Lord, thank you for the opportunity to come before you, Lord. Thank you for the knowledge and skills of the people in this room and the passion that they show for our young people and for the education of our citizens here, Lord. Thank you for the health that you give us. Continue to watch us and guide us in your light, Lord. We ask this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Chairman Irwin. Ladies and gentlemen, here's what we're going to do. We're going to spend 90 minutes together today, maybe 2 hours, but at 5 o'clock, we all turn into pumpkins. And so my job is to ask those who are presenting today to be mindful of our time. You should have all been briefed on that time allotment. Today is a chance for us to hear from 6 different agencies. And so members of the committee, we are going to hear from those 6 agencies today. We will consider public comment at a later time, but for today, it is about those agencies. If you don't mind, very quickly, if you are from one of those 6 agencies and you are one of those presenters today, raise your hand. And this is where we take the oath. I'm kidding. I'm going to have a series of identical questions for each of you, and I'm going to ask our folks here to help take notes on that. So when you hear those sets of questions to the first presenter, go ahead and prepare your answers to the other 5. It'll just help us expedite the process, and I will read them verbatim. So with that, we will ask the Governor's Office of Student Achievement to come up and join us and talk through things. I will make sure our podium mic is on. And so we have our first 4. We have 10 minutes allotted for each of our first 4 speakers. So the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. So are you going to ask, just process question? Do you want me to go through the 5 minutes I have prepared?
Please.
Okay.
Prepare
awesome.
that. Then we'll take questions from the committee, and then I'll finish with my questions.
Awesome. You all have a deck, and that deck was prepared with more information than I'm going to share today in 5 minutes. But let's go ahead and get started. We appreciate the opportunity always to meet with you, distinguished members. I'm going to start by talking about the mission, programs, and functions. And I'm going to divide our responsibilities in kind of 3 buckets. So we have always been an accountability agency since 2003, and we continue to do that through data, information, and the information that we have on our dashboards and the educator report card that we do every year that meets our ESSA requirement. Okay? So regarding research, most of the research and data that we get is from our longitudinal data system called Georgia Awards. And Georgia Awards was completed through Race the Top money back in the 2009-10 timeframe. It's the education and workforce longitudinal data system. So all 7 agencies, all of them are represented here today, and the Department of Labor add to that data. From that data, we're able to do the report card annually and to post on our website really good dashboards and downloadable data. And I would urge you to go there in your spare time, like after 5:15 today, take a look. There's some really good information about each district on that dashboard. Okay, now I'm going to talk about another bucket, which is what I call your investment in human capital. Okay, so 2 initiatives that have been around since 2015 and 2018. Growing Readers has been around since 2015, and this is something that a lot of folks are talking about right now as we talk about literacy. In the schools of ed, it's very It's very rare to have classes devoted to instruction in K through 3 reading. This program provides that instruction to teachers all over Georgia. And you can see from the map that we've covered quite a bit of Georgia in the years that we've been in existence. So in the 2021-22 cohort, you can see the numbers. We're over 12,200 students impacted by this best practice in literacy instruction. And I would just say this, you know, it's an investment in human capital, which is sustainable. And so for $1.6 million each year, thank you, we're able to do that. And next, the Governor's School Leadership Academy, been around since 2018. This is inducted teachers all the way to principals at the school level. And so it's an investment in teacher and leader professional development. And from the map, you can see 136 of the 181 districts have been served. And some of the comments from the evaluations in the past, I think that last one is especially interesting given the pandemic. All participants rated collaboration with other educators is very important. It's so rare, as some of you know, for a superintendent to be in the room with teachers, principals, and teacher leaders. It's rare. And so they're given that opportunity, and they're seeing growth from that. And the final program I want to talk about is probably the most popular program in Georgia. I would say the Governor's Honors Program. We're celebrating 60 years this year, and we'll be at Georgia Southern University. And we have one of the alum from 60 years ago who's on our steering committee, and she's very excited about being there during the summer. But last year, for the first time, we started really kind of aligning industry needs with the needs of students. And so we added cybersecurity and computer science. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. By the way, in the we were following 27.9, 2710, and 2711 in the tracking.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from the committee for Director Hawkins? Chairman Dickey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You talked about Governor's Honor Program and aligning it with industry. What other alignments? Well, those are two new ones, but you've got many others. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do. There's some 26 courses. They're not all aligned, but we added those two specifically for that purpose. The other thing that we're going to do for the first time this year, we would have done last year, but for COVID outbreak, was the first college and career fair on campus. And so we had invited many different industries to be a part of that, plus the University System of Georgia and TCSG.
I've got one other follow-up, just more of a statement. I know you and I have had conversations years past about accessibility to the Governor's Honors Program. I was concerned about a lot of our smaller systems and rural systems not really having students apply or really get picked. I don't know, some of both, but I hope you'll continue to look at being able to have students all across our state in different size systems attend that great program. It's a great program you do. So
we heard you, and we've been working on there were about 20 systems that had not ever nominated. And so we've been very strategic in our communications and in our outreach. And so we also believe by being at Georgia Southern down in a rural area of the state, we're going to generate a lot more excitement among superintendents and others. And the RESAs have been great to work with and get the word out. So from those 20, we had all but 5 nominate this year.
Thank you. Floor Leader Wade.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Director Hawkins. Appreciate it. On the slide that you talk about the growing readers, I notice, obviously I looked at my district first, and I noticed that we're not part partnering with that, is there something that would prohibit the schools in my area or the areas that are not partnering? Is that based on a just
No.
random selection? What's the criteria for them to participate? Are they doing their own thing and just don't utilize the resource?
There are actually two different ways. So because we get $2 million of federal funds, we are working with the lowest performing schools with that $2 million per federal requirements. With the 1.6, it's really a first come, first serve. And so I'd love to work with you on that.
Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm excited about what I see here, but I would love to know, I can't tell from the map, how much involvement have you received, similar to what you just asked, from the Chatham County area? Are they involved, are the schools and the principals involved in any of that? And that is not
Yes.
just taking in the Savannah area, but also that will go down to the end of the Georgia map.
Right.
Are
Right.
they very much involved?
We actually started conversations with Chatham just in the last 3 months.
Okay.
And for both programs. I believe there's been a change in superintendent recently, so not yet.
Change in presidents of the board.
Okay, gotcha. Anyway, there's conversations are continuing and they're very upbeat, and I believe that they'll be a part of both. As far as other counties in that area, again, we have bandwidth issues, but we'll take, through application or otherwise what we can.
I would like to, Mr. Chairman, just one other thing. I would like to meet with you regarding some of this because there are so many excellent programs, and I don't know if they have even looked at them or been exposed to them.
Absolutely.
I would love to meet with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Director Hawkins, for my questions, if you will, does the money included in the proposed budget for the $2,000 COLA adequately fund that for all of your agency?
Okay, for the GSLA Governor's Honors, which one?
I would say across the board.
Across the board. As far as bandwidth and the staff that we currently have, yes, absolutely.
Okay. What is your current agency head count, again, across the board?
We're at 26.
And how many vacancies?
We have probably technically 4.
Okay. And what's your annual turnover rate?
We had some, I think attrition 2 years ago was pretty high. And it was based on a number of factors. Anytime there's a new regime that comes in or a new governor, I think there's some philosophical, disagreements and so forth. And so a lot of that staff was very young. And it could be because young people don't stay more than 2 years.
Sure.
And so we've got a staff now that, but for one person, has been with us for the last 3 years.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any capital needs that you have that are not recognized in this budget?
No. As a matter of fact, we were really blessed right before the pandemic. We held 2 different spaces, one on the East Tower, one on the West, which was ridiculous. And so we merged into East Tower. And so we've done all of the work we need to do to have a good facility.
Okay, thank you very much. Seeing no other questions, I appreciate you being here today. Thank you. Secretary Arthur from our PSC, if you will join us at the podium, sir. Thank you for being here today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you all for having me, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Georgia Professional Standards Commission today. We are divided really into 4 different areas. The first one I'm going to talk about is our ed preparation division, and we oversee all of the education preparation programs that are in the state. There are over 1,027 at this point right now. That's how many programs there are. We have 9 people that are over that work with each college and each program to set the standards. Once the standards are set, they decide how they're going to teach it and what they're going to teach to meet that standard. But we do work with them to set those standards. We ended up that 75% of the students that complete a PSC approved program are still teaching 5 years after that. And that's the latest data that we have. I know you hear a lot of different percentages, 50% and things like that, but ours in the state of Georgia is 75%. And to reduce teacher shortages, we work very hard and have been working hard along with the governor's office on parapros. We work with individual superintendents, also helping them with a parapro on board to go through student teaching and go through those programs. And I have to say our higher ed programs are working with them too. It's amazing how they have changed to meet that time. But that is our ed prep program. Our largest division is our certification division, and we have about 40 employees in that one division. They use a 25-year-old legacy system to log everything from 1940 to present day. There are over 312,000 individuals right now with a working certificate. Now, in the state of Georgia, last year alone, we processed over 102,000 certification transactions. That's the highest ever. And those are from our colleges and coming in from out of state also. So that 312,000 that have a certificate with us, they can call us any day. They go online every day, just checking where they're at a lot of times, but it does take man hours. We feel like we're very responsive. Every single phone call we get, every single computer email we get, every bit of it is recorded. We record not only what they say, we record what we say too, so accountability is very strong on our reactions to people as they try to work toward a certificate. We continue across the state to see a lot of changeover in human resources people at individual school districts. And so every time they bring in new HR people, we have to do training and get them up to speed on how to use our programs and work with all of them across the state. But the number just seems to be increasing as far as with the HR. So we do a lot of webinars, we do a lot of newsletters and guidance. And we are continually working to automate and streamline everything that we do to make it easier for them. We've gone paperless. We have moving this year toward batch renewals where an HR person can renew a large part of their district at one time. And so we continue to work that way. I want to thank you all for your continued support on our Troops to Teachers program with our military. That is growing and has been more successful than ever, but it's where we work with military personnel and their spouses at the base as they're getting ready to retire and move on. Or maybe there's one of them that's going to be in the military, the other one wants to be a teacher. We work with them also to get them involved. Our second largest division is our ethics division. In our ethics division, we have 8.5 investigators. They come from backgrounds from the GBI up through all the way with deputy sheriffs, deputy investigators, county investigators. They have a huge background. Our complaints, we have, unfortunately, that number is going back up after the pandemic. Last year, we had 1,700 complaints filed. To give you an example, before the pandemic, we were up to 1,940, but we're kind of creeping up toward that number. And so to be proactive, we do a lot of outreach efforts. We do a lot of webinars, a lot of in-person sessions. We've added a resource for our school systems. One thing we didn't have a parapro ethics model, and we found out we're getting parapro complaints 3 to 1 to a certified teacher. And so we didn't have anything for them. And so now we have a parapro ethics model that we work with all the REISs to do. It's free for the parapros to go through, and what it does, it gives them an idea of what their expectations have to be when they go in that classroom or anytime they're around kids. So we see that helping. Like I said, that group is growing. The PSC we have 10 standards within the Code of Ethics, And once those are broken is when we get word from superintendents and principals on that. We can take it from citizens also. It doesn't have to be from school personnel. It can be from a parent or anyone from that standard. The last division is our IT division. We support staff of 80 people. We maintain 5 websites and 40 applications that have all been developed in-house over the last 25 years. And so it is serving its time. You'll find money in the budget, this budget on page 8, 27.8, we're moving into the cloud. We also have another proposal of over $3.5 million that's in the budget to move toward an entirely new system. But our first move is moving into the cloud. And so there's $125,838 is what's been estimated, and then the governor's office recommendation was to add another $69,000, and that's for the ongoing cost of staying up in the cloud. But if somebody comes into the West Wing and they unplug electrical cord and we're connected to it, we're down. If someone goes to a server and pulls something out and pulls the wrong cord, we're down. Everything we do comes in through that. And so we experienced it last fall, and that was really a major push to move on to the cloud system. So I have it in my notes. I'll go ahead and answer. We have a total of about 79.5. Not about. We have exactly 79.5 positions, and we have 2 openings. Thank you.
Just while we're on those questions, turnover rate?
Pretty big. I say fairly big. Certification's tough. They have to be able to analytically look at several different things at a time and be able to request an answer, and sometimes that. I'm going to look. What would you say? How many? 4 or 5 every quarter? Not that many? Not that many, so it's not bad. Once they get there, they like it if they can do the work.
Understood.
And,
Any capital needs outside the ones you mentioned that are not funded in this budget?
No, sir.
No, sir. Okay. And does the budget adequately cover that $2,000
Yes.
COLA? Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Chairman Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the good work for our students, Mr. Arthur. Let me ask about the investigators. You said 8.5. And I believe, this has been a concern of mine in the past. I believe we've had these conversations of your 2 openings. Neither one of those are investigators.
Not at this point.
Good.
Right.
And their caseload.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. We're behind. We're not as far behind as we were a year ago. This time, we're catching up. We work with the Attorney General's office weekly. They handle our cases if it goes to court, but we are behind on those. We've changed our forms some to help. We started asking systems, before you send it to us, tell us what you did. If you're just sending them to us and you didn't do anything, is it that serious? And sometimes, of course, I want to say sometimes they may not do it. It's all on us, but we're able to decipher that. But yeah, the caseload's huge.
One last question, follow up. Do you 8.5? That seems like might be up a half investigator over the last 5 years, or you've had 8.
Is that one? The half's John Grant, so you know John.
Right.
He can handle more than half. But it's up. I've been there 3 years, so it is up 1.
Up 1 investigator.
1 person. Yeah.
Which one? 1, you think?
Is it 1? She knows. John's only half.
Only half.
He came back. He retired. We filled his position and hired him back.
And brought him on half. That's what I was
time.
thinking. Okay.
Yeah, so it hadn't grown
Thank you.
any. And yeah, the caseload's huge.
Okay. Chairman Dickey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To follow up a little bit about parapros, I didn't realize y'all certificate. What's the terminology and oversee those?
Everyone that's in a classroom has to have a certificate. They have a beginner certificate. They have to have one. That way, if something happens in ethics or something happens, they do have a certificate that they're responsible for, or provisional. And it does move with them and move up. But that was started before I got there, so it's been started in the last 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
But yeah, they do have to have one, and
Didn't realize that.
I didn't either, because when I retired as superintendent, they didn't, and then when I got there, they did. So, yes, sir.
Thank you. Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sitting here wondering, I'm hearing about the certificate, hearing about ethics. I'm new to this committee, and I'm not aware of some of the items, so would it be a problem for if I could talk with you or talk with someone on your staff to find out and sort of fill me in on what we're talking about?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We'll contact your office. Okay.
Last question, Floor Leader Wade.
Very quick. One on the cloud operating costs. Are you going to also update or include a new redundancy solution as well? Is that a part of that package,
Yes.
or is that separate?
I'm thinking it's part of the package.
Okay. All right. And if you find out it, I'd just like to
I'll
know,
let you know,
just because
for sure.
that's extremely important when you
Okay.
make that type
I
of
can find that out
technological
that way.
transfer. And then, as it relates to teacher certificate revocations, have you seen an increase, decrease, remaining about flat? I know it's hard because of the pandemic, but as far as a percentage,
Yeah.
you see any trends or anything that's concerning?
I think it stayed the same since I've been there.
Okay.
We have very few. We don't have those even monthly to come across. People, that's all you read about in the paper. So people think that's it, but really we may have 10 to 12 a year, one a month.
Out of that 1,700, 1,800
Right,
actual.
that's it. It's a small percentage.
Okay.
It is. It's just that the media's always going to cover that one.
Okay, thank you.
We're like any other business. People do dumb things sometimes, and some things they can survive with, and some things they can't.
Thank you, Secretary.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. Director Potvin from ERS, if you will join us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jim Potvin, Executive Director for the Employees Retirement System of Georgia. We are the entity that is responsible for the administration of 5 defined benefit plans for statewide employees, including the Employees Retirement System, the Legislative Retirement System, the Public School Employees Retirement System, that's the non-teacher system, the Judicial Retirement System, and the Georgia Military Pension Fund. We have 3 defined contribution plans. The first is a savings plan for part-time and seasonal employees. The other 2 are the state's 401k and 457 plans. And we also are responsible for the administration of 2 closed life insurance plans. We call them the group term life insurance programs. Just to get it out of the way, we are about 98 strong right now with 6 openings. Last year's turnover was about 16%. The most basic financial measure to determine whether or not we are doing okay on a financial level is called the funding ratio. That is essentially the ratio of the assets of the plan to the liabilities of the plan. These are snapshots, right? So what I like to look at is trends over time. But just in terms of a snapshot, the current funded ratio as of the most recent actuarial valuation is 71.6%. We have been in the low 70s to mid 70s for the past at least 5 or 6 years or so, and will be, according to my projections, for the next several years. That is not to say that the plans have been static. We are always looking at the actuarial assumptions, trying to make sure that we're doing things that are keeping up sort of with trends. So, for example, mortality. The long-term trend is for longer lifespans, and so every so often we do what's called an experience study, and we look at how our most recent set of assumptions matches up with the experience we've had over that period of time, and we make adjustments if necessary. And those adjustments have generally been to increase the assumption for how long people are going to live and draw retirement benefits. That's one very significant example. Another example is discretionary changes. Last year, the General Assembly, Governor's Office, and the Board of Trustees collectively worked together to make a very significant investment in the pension program for ERS by beginning to pre-fund a cost of living adjustment. That is not to say that we are currently capable of paying 3% COLAs every year, but we took a very important first step toward that. In doing so, we did incur some liabilities, and that's why we're at 71% today and not 76 or 77%. But on the whole, a worthwhile investment for those employees who were hired prior to July of 2009. Those hired after that time period are not eligible for those COLAs under current statute. The actuarially determined contribution rates, that's the basically the percentage of payroll that the state is required to pay for funding these plans. Those are also determined by the actuarial evaluation process. They've been very steady in recent years at around 21% and 24%, so combined about 23% or so of pay for all ERS members. That number is going up, has gone up this year because of that investment that I just talked about. There is a payback, a payment period that we have to go through in order to get those monies actually into the system. But we have begun to do that. The market value of the systems collectively is around $18 or $19 billion. It has been fluctuating quite a bit in recent months and years. In the ERS system itself, we've been between 14 and 14.5 billion in recent times. We set an investment return assumption of 7.2% per year. We sort of build that into our future assumptions. Over the past 5 years, we've been on all sides of that. For the first 3 of those 5 years, it was very steady. We got 9%, then 7%, then 5.5%. And then the last 2 years, the wheels came off. We went up 29% one year and down 12% the next year. So we can experience significant volatility from time to time. What we are more interested in is the long-term results. And it is interesting to note that those 5 years, the average is about 7.1, so very close to our long-term goal of the 7.2. But that doesn't make the ride any more fun while we're going through it, of course. We pay about $1.5 billion per year in benefits. 1.45 of that is ERS itself. The average ERS pension benefit's about $26,000 per year. And that is declining because we're starting to get some retirees from our most recent tier, which, as you'll remember, is part pension and part 401k. So if I just look at the pension benefits we're paying, those are going down compared to prior years, and that trend will continue. In the 401k plan, the other major accomplishment in the last legislative session was to greatly enhance the 401k match for the GSEPS members. Those are the people who were hired after January 1 of 2009. We now have an employer match that is based in part on service. So everybody's going to get a dollar-for-dollar match up to 5% of savings. If people stay longer than 6 years, which is what we're trying to encourage them to do, then we will enhance their match further as long as they continue to save the 5%. And the maximum match that somebody can get is up to 9%, which is triple what it was prior to that change. So we're very grateful for that change and looking forward to seeing some great results in future years. Currently in the 401k plan, about half of the assets are for GSEPS members, and about half are for people who were already in the plan prior to 2009. They just use it as sort of a supplemental savings plan. And one other statistic that I like to track, how many of our people are actually saving at least 5% in the GSEPS program and getting that full match. Number is currently above 82%, so we're doing very well in that measure. As far as the tracking document, I do have a couple of changes to make. I'm section 25. No changes in the deferred compensation area. That's basically the fees that we pay to our third-party administrator for handling the accounts for the 401k and 457 plans. But I do have some changes for the other 3 items. 25.2, the Georgia Military Pension Fund. What we ask for here is a direct appropriation of the actuarial contribution. We don't have pay. We don't get a percentage of payroll for the state's contribution here. You guys give it to us in a series of payments over the course of the year. Last year in this year, FY23, the amount of what we call the actuarially determined employer contribution, or ADEC, was $2.84 million. You'll notice that that number is in position for FY24. So that's an outdated number. This year's number, I'm happy to say, is slightly lower than that, $2,793,161. So that's the number that we're going to be asking for in the final version of this budget. $2,793,161. Under the public school employees retirement system, last year's number, I believe the $35 million number that you see there is last year's number plus an adjustment which is intended to fund an increase in the benefit for the public school employees. So you'll notice the note 25.3.1 utilize existing funds to increase the PSERS multiplier from 16 to 1650. The approximate first year cost of that increase is about $2.8 million. So if you take that and last year's number, you get something pretty close to the $35 million number you see there. This year's number is actually going to be lower than that. So the valuation report asked for a contribution from you all of $29,531,000. So if you add $2.826 million to that, I come up with a final number of $32,357,000, which I will ask to replace the $35 million number that is there. And then finally, under item 25.4, system administration, on an annual basis, we ask for a small contribution of $10,400 to fund our activities as the state's Social Security Administrator, essentially the keeper of the agreements for all the localities that want to participate in the federal Social Security system. It's a relatively small but important activity that we undergo. There's $17,400 there because there was $7,000 added to the budget in anticipation of House Bill 780 from last year passing. It did not pass, so the $7,000 needs to be removed, and the final number should be $10,400. With that, I'll take any questions.
Well, the gold star goes to the gentleman who decides to give money back.
Just wait till next year, Mr. Chairman.
To anyone who's been in my office asking for money, I think we've got a good head start. So I calculate north of $2.8 million. So thank you for that. But at this time, I see no questions from the committee. So if I could.
Yes, sir.
Does the money included in the proposed budget for the $2,000 COLA adequately fund that for all of your agency?
Yes, we're funded.
You gave us head count, vacancies, and turnover. Do you have any capital needs that aren't funded?
I do not.
Okay. Floor Leader Wade.
Just a real quick question. Given the inflationary pressures that we're seeing from the national economy and then kind of a continuation of a negative yield curve, or at least looks like that trend, are there any concerns or events that you're monitoring that might impact that goal of 7.2% for your return? I mean, as a banker, I'm concerned. So I'm just wanted your thoughts briefly.
Yeah, so the answer to that question, of course, is always. We are very nearly entirely a stocks and bonds shop. We're about 70% public plus private equities, about 28% fixed income, and then a little bit of cash to fund our ongoing needs. So, your guess is as good as mine in terms of the public equity markets. We're actually expecting a little underperformance on the private equity side because we have greatly outperformed for a couple of years, and when you have a downturn, those reported returns tend to lag. So we're going to get some underperformance there, but it's a very small part of our portfolio right now. On the fixed income side, a lot of that has to do with the Fed. They are slowing down their increases, but I'm not sure I can predict exactly where they're going to stop. I think that the worst of it's behind us, but I wouldn't guarantee.
You're being
we're quite
recorded.
done.
You know that, right? Because we're all going to turn back and claim that to be the
Yes,
truth.
sir. Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you. See no other questions. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Evans from Teachers Retirement System. Thank you for being here today, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I realize it's a little bit of a liability having Mr. Potvin and myself back to back to talk about actuarial things at 3:30 in the afternoon. And I wish I could make it entertaining, but hopefully the value that we provide to our educators in the form of a pension is something that at least makes it significant in terms of what we do. I look forward to giving you a little bit of an update and then answering your questions as well. So I'm going to move pretty quickly. You do have a presentation here that you can refer to. First question that I'd like to start with basically answer the question, why do we have a defined benefit plan? Most states around the country do have a defined benefit plan, and we've had one since 1943 in Georgia, became operational in 1945. But the reason that we do primarily is to provide for recruitment and retention strength, as well as to provide for retirement security for our teachers when they retire. We have over $5.7 billion paid out annually, and those are constituents that I'm sure that you get to see on a regular basis in your communities throughout Georgia. Some key plan information that I would share with you. We serve obviously more than K-12 education. They are our largest group, but also higher education, technical college system, as well as some lesser recognized groups that are equally as important, including our public libraries, county extension agencies, charter schools, and others. We're serving now over 500,000 members in TRS, with roughly 245,000 of those active contributing, 146,000 or 145,000 who are retirees. And then we have a number of those that are inactive, and those are folks that may come day. They're out of the field right now, but they may come back for some reason in the future, or they may be waiting for retirement down the road. Our funding ratio currently sits at 81.3%. That was helped last couple of years ago with a good return that we've had, and so we have been in that range. We don't expect that to change significantly in the not too distant future. We've done something that we felt like was important during the past year. We reduced our assumed rate of return from 7.25 down to 6.9. You may ask the question, why did we do that? Well, it's actually a national trend to reduce those assumed rates of return, and it actually takes risk off the table, because our ability to basically, to put in lay terms, to meet 6.9 is easier than it is to meet 7.25. And then if we miss it, we actually have less of a need for money to come in from the legislature and the state government to pay for it. But if we exceed that 6.9%, we actually have more assets to smooth in for a period of time. So I know that gets a little bit crazy to talk about again late in the afternoon, but that is something that we've done, and we are now sitting at what would be considered the national average in terms of assumed rate of return. Our assets currently are sitting at $92 billion. As Mr. Potvin referred, it's been a ride over the last 16 months. We've been as high as $105 billion, as low as $85 billion. So we're sitting where we're at $92 billion, which again makes us to be about roughly the 23rd largest pension system in the nation. We are funded largely by the contributions that come from our employers and our employees. So you see the rate put there at 6% for the employee and 19.98% for the employer contribution rate. Just to remind some of you are well familiar, but we do manage 80% of our assets in-house at a cost to manage those assets at among some of the lowest basis points in the nation. A little bit about plan design. We are a defined benefit plan with a 10-year vesting, full retirement indicated here at 30 years, 10 years at the age of 60, but they also can retire at 25 years with a penalty. Chances are you've probably been asked by a constituent, can we get a 25-year retirement? And they can. But they retire with a penalty should they do that. Sometimes people ask us about what we do to prevent spiking in the final years of service. There are certain provisions in place, both by state law as well as by the Internal Revenue Service salary caps as well. Our asset allocation is primarily roughly 70% equities, 30% fixed income. A couple of years ago, you did approve TRS joining the ERS plan in terms of being able to do private equity, and we believe that was a good move, but we are moving slowly in that direction with plans to only increase that percentage rate 1% a year. The next slide shares with you a little bit about the recent market volatility. I call 2021 that year that we love to remember. Unfortunately, 2022 is that year that we would love to forget. But the reality of it is we're sitting this year at 7.5% return year to date, and just, again, optimistic and hopeful that we will be able to see that number maintain itself or even do better between now at the end of the year. Historically, if you look at our returns, you will see what that has looked like that over time. And the interesting thing, and have no idea whether it's going to happen this year or not, but if you look at the chart on the lower bottom, anytime typically that we've had a significant loss in a previous year, we, within the next couple of years, should have, if history repeats itself, a good recovery. And I know that many of you are probably optimistic that that's what we're experiencing, not only for the state, but also for personal reasons as well. A few other things that I think you might be interested in on the next page. I've been asked by a number of our legislators over the last 3 years, are we seeing more people retire? And we track that number basically on a weekly basis. Our division director for that area gives us an update, and we've really not. We actually saw the first year of the pandemic, we actually saw a drop in the number of retirements. The next year we saw a slight increase, and then last year we were back down to what we consider to be a normal rate of retirement. Last year in the legislative session, you passed House Bill 385. That bill is a return to work bill, which allows a retired beneficiary to return to work in a critical needs area, as defined by RESA district. The numbers of people taking advantage of that have been low, and we understand that, but let me tell you the good news about that. Of the 212 beneficiaries that have come back to work, the largest single area is in the area of special education. The second largest area is in mathematics, and the third largest area is in science. So the good news of the story of that legislation is that there's over 210 classrooms in the state of Georgia that have a certified teacher who's experienced, who's come back to work to help their local school district and local school and help those students ensure that they have a quality educator. So I think that's a success story as we look at it. The last slide that I'll refer to talks a little bit about some things that we've done over the years to help ensure our sustainability as a pension system. And again, I won't go through all of those things, but we do look at what are the appropriate things that need to be done from a trustee level and from an administration level to ensure that we are as sustainable in the next 75 years as we have been in the last 75 years. Mr. Chairman, I would just address the only item that we have that is in your budget is on 45.1, which is a floor COLA. We're down now to basically just $83,000 that goes into our budget as a direct appropriation. Again, for clarification, the majority of the money that ends up coming back to TRS first goes to our employers and then comes back to us as an employer contribution rate. And I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have, including those that you've got for each of us to answer.
Sure. Chairman Dickey.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Evans. Appreciate good job your TRS did. Very important to our teachers. I tell a story about one of the first people. I asked one of my retired teachers, one of my former teachers, when I ran to vote for me, she said, "I will if you promise not to mess with my retirement." So, and she meant it too. But big money, $80 billion, a lot to manage. You got a lot of highly qualified, highly paid employees. Who sets those salaries?
Those salaries for our investment professionals are set by what we refer to as a joint management committee. Those will be 4 trustees from the teachers' retirement system and 3 trustees from the state's employees' retirement system.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does the money included in the proposed budget for the $2,000 COLA adequately fund that for all of your agency?
Yes, sir.
What is your head count? How many vacancies do you have?
We have a head count of 204. We have a vacancy. We have 7 vacancies.
Annual turnover?
Our annual turnover we're 3.27% year to date. We're on an annualized rate. We run about 7%.
Okay. Do you have any capital needs that are not funded in this budget?
No, sir.
Okay. Floor Leader Wade.
just a quick question. Just in comparison to the two retirement systems, I've got a couple of folks that could potentially ask me this question, so I want to be able to answer it succinctly. The difference between them having a 7.2% target, and I understand your justification to drop down to 6.9, I believe is what you said. Right. Is there a reason, and not to put him back on the spot, but that they should have parity between the two as far as an investment strategy for both agencies that serve much of the same mission?
Well, all pension systems are not necessarily created equal, and our two systems do differ in some particular ways. The ERS system we would refer to as perhaps a more mature system. Their ratio, for example, their ratio of number of active contributings would be basically 1-to-1. We're almost 2-to-1. So we have a little bit better cash flow from that perspective. Again, our ability to reduce that hopefully provides a little bit of a smoother process for you guys as you look to fund that ADEC on a regular basis. Because if you can remember, some of you remember 4 or 5 years ago, we had basically a $400 million increase. And those types of increases are really tough for you guys to handle from a budgetary standpoint. So again, us reducing that means that when we do miss it, we miss it by a less of a rate, which means that's a little bit of a smoother pathway and a less risky area for you to have to fund.
Chairman Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Evans, return to work. Some of us were very proud of that, to get those 210 teachers back in the classroom with that experience and knowledge. Have we seen a negative impact of those 210 on TRS? Or any impact?
Actually, Chairman Edward, I think it's a very positive impact, and we said this actually when it was going through. For those 210 people who've coming back, if they were coming, and you'll understand this, if they were coming back 49%, we didn't get any employer contribution rate. Because the way you drafted this legislation, we do get that employer contribution rate. As a local system, if that's an earned position, they're earning that. So that's actually helping earn money at the QBE level flow back to TRS that would not be coming to us. So I tell you, actually, I believe it has a positive impact on us financially.
Great. Thank you.
Doctor, thank you for being here. We appreciate your time.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you. Next, we're going to double our allotment of time to 20 minutes. We'll hear from DeCal. Don't spend all your time in one place now, okay? I'm just kidding. Floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, members of the committee. Thank you for your time. My name is Ryan Ringsrud. I'm DeCal's Deputy Commissioner for Finance and Administration. I'm here this afternoon to cover two topics for you guys. First, I'm going to go through the changes in the Governor's FY 2024 budget recommendation, which are going to be found on page 1 of your tracking sheet in section 22 for House Bill 19. And the second is to give you guys a quick update on the one-time federal COVID-19 relief funding that DeCal has received since the pandemic started 2 years ago. So, Mr. Chairman, if you'll allow it, I'll get right to it. And I'm going to start with the FY 2024 Governor's Budget Report. I did pass, or Molly was nice enough to pass out a set of folders for you guys. It's got our slides in it. If you want to pull that up, or you can follow on your tracking sheet, we should have the numbers, the line numbers for you in both places. So on page 1 of your tracking sheet, you'll see that DeCal's in section 22. In section 22.1, you see our Child Care Services Program. On lines 22.1.1 through 22.1.3, we have some statewide changes there. I'm going to skip over those. I'm going to go directly to line 22.1.4 under Child Care Services. You will see an increase of $1.045 million. This increase is related to an adjustment in our FMAP rate for our CAPS program, which is housed under the Child Care Services Division. The percentage of the CAPS program that is covered by the federal government is decreasing from 66.02% down to 65.89%. And the result of that means for every dollar that funds this program, the state's got to throw in 10 or 12 more cents. And so the amount of state funds that will be required to draw down the same amount of federal funds we've always drawn down for the CAPS program will go up by $1.045 million. So that's really just a FMAP adjustment there. Okay, the next set of changes you're going to see in section 22 for DeCal are also on page 1 down at the bottom of your page. Section 22.3 under our pre-kindergarten program. 2231, 2232 are statewide changes again, so I'm going to skip over those. On lines 22.3.3, you will see a $178,981 reduction to the pre-K formula based on the experience and credential level of the teachers in the program. Since lead teacher salaries are set based on their years of experience and their credential level, the formula calls for a different number based on the makeup and composition of our set of teachers that are in the program every year. So this decrease is just following the formula for this year. I've seen years where this has required you guys to have to kick in a little more money when our teachers are more credentialed or have more experience. This year we're in a situation where it's actually gone down a little bit. Okay, the next change you'll see for decal is line 22.3.4. You'll see $14.035 million. This is an increase to pre-K classroom operations funding. Just to make sure everybody knows what pre-K classroom operating funds are and what programs use those for in a pre-K setting. So if you think about you got a classroom of 22 children, any instructional costs that are not funded anywhere else specifically by line item in the pre-K formula, such as supplies, classroom materials, classroom equipment, the utilities to keep the lights and the air on, the 22 chairs that the children sit in, everything that's not specifically called out anywhere else in the formula. If they choose to go on a field trip, anything like that, we call all of that kind of one bucket of operations. Our operations funding has only seen one increase in the last 7 fiscal years, and that was a 2.5% increase back in FY22, 2 years ago. Our pre-K programs have expressed to us that funding for classroom operations has not kept up with increases in the cost of classroom equipment, supplies, and materials, and that over the last couple years with the significant inflation we've had going on since the COVID-19 pandemic, that kind of gap has grown even bigger. So this increase of $14 million equates to $3,676 per classroom per year. So every classroom is getting $3,676 more in operations funding under this proposal than they were in the past. This brings our average amount of classroom operating funding from just over $18,000 per classroom per year to just under $22,000 per classroom per year. So we're very excited about that, and this is on, and our pre-K programs are as well. This is on average a 20% increase to pre-K classroom operations, and much needed with all the inflation and the lack of increase over the last 7 years. The last change you guys are going to see for decal is on line 22.3.5. We're still under our pre-K program. You'll see a $20.6 million increase to increase lead and assistant teacher salaries by $2,000. This matches the $2,000 salary increase that the governor has announced for the K through 12 teachers as well. And this will bring our average lead teacher salary for pre-K from just over $41,000 per year to just over $43,000 per year. And our assistant teachers, it'll bring the average from just over $18,000 per year to just over $20,000 per year, which for them is an 11% increase, which is huge. All right, Mr. Chairman, next I'm going to give a brief overview of the one-time federal COVID relief dollars decal has received. And again, if you'll refer to the folder I gave you guys, there's a slide deck in there. And I believe the second or third page, you'll start seeing slides about the COVID relief dollars. Decal has received $2.1 billion, with a B, in COVID relief funding from 2020 through 2022 via the 3 major COVID relief funding bills passed by Congress. We've received, allocated, and spent all $144 million that we were appropriated in the CARES Act by Congress. We have received and allocated all $403 million that we were appropriated in the CRSA Act by Congress. And we've spent over $350 million of that $403. The last $50 million must be spent by 9/30/2023, and we are on track to do so. We have received also $1.6 billion from ARPA, the ARP Act, in 2 different buckets. You'll see them on that table. It says ARPA discretionary and ARPA stabilization. We received over $1.6 billion through ARPA, and we've allocated over $1.4 billion of that. Those ARPA dollars must be spent by either 9/30/2023 or 2024, depending on the bucket they come out of, and we are on track to meet those deadlines as well. The primary focus of all these dollars, the Congress routed all three of these appropriations for us through our Child Care Development Fund, which is our main federal funding stream. And they dictated that the primary focus of these dollars will be to, one, stabilize the child care industry. So when states across the country shut down, kids quit going to child care. When kids quit going to child care centers' revenue is dependent upon tuition, right? So when kids quit going all over the country, child care centers are in jeopardy of closing. So part of the idea of these dollars is, hey, we need to get dollars because when states are ready to go back to work, and we all know Georgia was one of the first to get back to reopening, we need to have child care in place so that when mom and dad are ready to go back to work, they got somewhere for the child to go. It's an economic development issue. The second primary focus of these dollars was to help families access high quality care. And the last focus was to support the early education workforce. One of the primary challenges we faced in trying to administer all these COVID dollars, I mean, I guess I would say in addition to the obvious one, which is the sheer volume and number of dollars, you know, where you guys saw on your tracking sheet, our budget this year is $938 million. Next year, we're proposing $975. So you drop $2.1 billion on top of that in one-time funding, and you triple our budget. But it's one-time funding, so we're not hiring additional accountants, finance staff, processing, administering all that is a humongous burden. In addition to that, the other challenge is the one-time nature of the funding. Because it's one-time in nature, any programs, initiatives, anything we want to do with those dollars, we have to make sure that those programs don't have ongoing cost or forever cost, and make sure that they truly are one-time in nature. The last thing we want to do is me to come back here next year and say, hey, Mr. Chairman, we're running out of $2 billion, so I need you to shore up this, that, or the other. We were very intentional about how we allocated these dollars to make sure they went to things that are one-time in nature. So on the last slide, I'm going to share with you guys some examples of some of the larger COVID relief initiatives that we funded with these dollars. And as you'll see from these examples, we love a good acronym here at DeKalb, and you're going to see some of our best work on some of these. The first is ACCESS, which stands for Awarding Child Care Education Scholarship Supplements. Through ACCESS, our CAPS program is temporarily supporting families by paying the full cost of child care through at least September 2023 instead of the portion of the cost that we normally pay now. So normally in our CAPS program, we kind of cost share with the client. We pick up, say, 60%, 80% of the cost of child care. They pay the rest in what we call a family fee. We're paying the full cost of that through the ACCESS program right now. But again, that is temporary in nature. We do not have the funding to do that forever. So far, we've paid out over $150 million to child care providers who participate in our CAPS program via ACCESS. Next one I want to mention is our STABLE program. The STABLE stands for Short-Term Assistance Benefit for Licensed Entities. STABLE was intended to help stabilize the cost of maintaining child care programs in the state of Georgia, so that the supply of child care remains sufficient for the state to get back to work as we find our new normal coming out of this pandemic. Rounds 1, 2, and 3 of STABLE distributed over $165 million to licensed child care providers, and the current round, STABLE 4, which we've called STABLE Forward, is distributing monthly payments to child care providers through September of 2023. By the time we get to that date in September of 2023, we will have distributed over $1 billion to child care industry in the state of Georgia. And the primary result of that we're seeing is that in Georgia, child care, the capacity is not decreasing, child care is not closing. We're seeing in other states around the country, child care is closing down. If they don't have kids coming, they don't have tuition. And once your capacity's hit, it's really hard to build it back up. So we're really proud of the STABLE program, helping us keep the doors open so Georgia can get back to work. The next one I want to focus on is POWER, another great acronym here, Providing Our Workforce Essential Recognition. POWER has provided 3 supplemental payments of $1,000 to all eligible early learning professionals in the state of Georgia, as well as other staff who work in child care centers. In 3 rounds of POWER payments, we've distributed $117 million to around 115,000 recipients in the last year and a half. The next initiative we're going to be doing with POWER, we're calling POWER Up. It begins this year where we're supporting increased tuition reimbursement rates and temporary wage supplements for ECE teachers pursuing a credential while still working. Last one I want to mention is our CAPS expansion, which increased the number of children served by our CAPS program by 10,000. So in any normal month, CAPS program in Georgia serves around 50,000 children. We've been able to use some of these extra federal dollars to increase it so we can serve 60,000 children. So we've expanded the program by 20%. We've accomplished this by expanding the income eligibility limits in the CAPS program and increasing them from 50% of state median income to 85% of state median income. So essentially, we made more of the population eligible for the program so we could fill an additional 10,000 slots. To date, we've spent over $60 million to support an additional 10,000 children in the CAPS program. Mr. Chairman, that's all I got.
I appreciate it. So I want to go back to the access program for a
Yes,
minute.
sir.
You know, you mentioned here that that's typically been 60-ish%.
And I'm ballparking there.
Right, fair enough. It's been less than 100%.
Yes, sir.
What is being done to educate those recipients that September 2023 is not an infinite number, and it is a date that will arrive on
Yes, sir.
their calendar?
That's a great question. So in all our messaging and all our marketing around this program, we've made it clear that, and even in my remarks to you, you saw I said we're temporarily supporting families. We've made it clear that this is a temporary initiative. We do recognize that when this runs out, it's going to be a challenge for both families and child care providers. Because see, we think of it in the context of benefiting families, right? Because we're paying the full cost. They don't have to pay that. But what happens in reality is lots of times child care providers have to go chase families for that differential of what we pay versus the full rate. So it's actually benefiting both providers and families. So we're doing our best to get the word out, social media posts, all our memos that go out to our clients, our providers. We note the end date in there. And so we're doing our best to get the word out, but just quite frankly, you know, there is going to be some cliff that exists. When you inject $2 billion into an industry that has not had it before, as much as we want to try to get the word out, you know, that cliff is coming and it's real, Mr. Chairman.
Understood. Chairman Irwin. Oh, no. Back row here. I can't run this machine. Representative Jackson.
I thank you for asking the question I was concerned about. The date, September 2023. Are you going to propose before it comes to be, before this date ends, that the state continue to finance these kinds of programs? Because I would hate to see you just drop them, and then the parents and the kids would be the ones that are suffering.
Yes, ma'am.
And it seems like, you could propose something, a perspective, how much it would cost since September is the deadline.
Yes, ma'am. What I will tell you is that, first off, that's a very good question and a very real concern. And we are having some very serious yet somewhat preliminary internal discussions on ways we might be able to do something beyond 9/30/2023. Those discussions to this point have not really left the four walls of decal. So it'd be a little, I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse, so I don't want to say too much here. But I do think it's a very real concern. If you notice that slide where I mentioned how many COVID dollars are allocated versus how many have been appropriated, you'll see a little difference and a little cushion there. So we're talking about various ways, whether it be state investment, other federal funds. We're just not quite there yet.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What is your retention rate for teachers? I'm hearing about different complaints and different concerns in my district about daycare centers, which I welcome some further conversations with you about that.
Yes, ma'am.
Offline, because it would take me a little bit longer today. But I do want to know what the retention rate is for teachers, because what I'm hearing is daycare teachers are leaving.
Yes, ma'am. What you're hearing is the same thing we're hearing.
Because of the salaries, though.
Yes, ma'am. The first point I want to emphasize to you is that most of the child care in the state of Georgia, they're private businesses. It's our job to regulate and monitor them for health and safety, in some cases give them funding, but these are all private businesses. Therefore, I don't have an exact turnover or retention rate I can share with you, because that's their private business. They don't always share that with us. What I would tell you is that everything you're hearing about the teacher shortage is real. I think it's often talked about in the context of the K through 12 teacher shortage, and that is a real thing. But what I would submit to you is, and you also heard me rattle off these pre-K salary numbers, average salary going from $41,000 to $43,000. A pre-K classroom is not reflective of what's happening in the other rooms in a child care center. On average, child care employees are making somewhere around $9, $11 an hour to literally teach some of our youngest learners where their brain's developing more than it's going to develop at any time in the rest of their educational career. So we know they're underpaid. And so we're seeing the teacher shortage in the birth to 5 space as well. it is a serious challenge and a serious concern when you can go to Quick Trip and make $15 an hour and make more than you can make in most child care centers in the state of Georgia. So while I don't have a number for you, we share your concern, and we're hearing the same things you're hearing.
Thank you. Floor Leader Wade.
Just wanted to find out about the same kind of issue that the CAPS expansion experience. That's 10,000 students that are currently being served above the 50,000.
Yes, sir.
Do you guys have any ideas on how to potentially navigate that change? And is that 10,000 students either that are, that are going to be 4 years old or 5 years old here soon that won't be able to be served? And we've got a literacy issue in the state that we're trying to look at and address, and now
Yes, sir.
you would think would be benefiting the efforts behind literacy is going to end up potentially facing a cliff. So what's your...
Yeah, so first off, that's a great question. So on the 10,000 children, what I mentioned was the way we added those 10,000 children was to increase our eligibility limit from you used to have to make less than 50% of state median income to be eligible for CAPS. We increased that to 85% of state median income. We've already filled all 10,000 slots, and we've already put our eligibility limits back down. As of December 2022, our eligibility limits are back down to 50%. So we're not continuing to add beyond what we're funded for is the first thing I'd tell you. The second thing, our federal funding stream requires that when we give someone a certificate for childcare and we determine them eligible for CAPS, that we have to fund them for 12 months. We're not allowed to kick them off after 3 months, or if they quit showing up or whatever. That certificate has, so we kind of view that as a quote unquote liability in my world, because you produced a certificate that's good for 12 months worth of care, whether they show up or not. That's a liability on the books, right? So while that traditionally has been a challenge for us, in this case, one thing it's doing is it's not like the day we change the eligibility limits from 85 back to 50. If you're between 50 and 85, you get kicked out. You're getting to ride your full 12 months through. Now, and also, we're adding them on a rolling basis, so it's not going to be like on one day 10,000 kids fall off. It's going to be, hey, slowly via attrition, as we've moved our eligibility limits back, we're going to slowly attrition down month by month by 9/30/2024 back down to 50,000 kids. So there's nothing sudden and abrupt, but we still have to get the 10,000 kids. We don't have funding currently to continue that.
Representative Jackson.
Yes, and did I understand you to say that there are other agencies that you are using, in this program? In other words, it's not being operated by the public school systems.
What program are you referring to, ma'am? The CAPS program?
I'm looking here. I'm still back to that September.
Oh, okay. So you're on our federally funded initiative.
Yes.
So yes, ma'am. So most of that is funded via our CAPS program. And CAPS program, we determine eligibility, we provide the scholarship, but child care providers around the state of Georgia provide the care to the family, and we pay them directly. So there's no other agencies. What I was referring to is the child care providers,
Okay, thank you.
which largely are private small businesses.
Yeah.
My final question.
Yes, sir.
Does the money included in the proposed budget for the $2,000 COLA adequately fund that for all of your agency?
Yes, sir.
What is your head count? How many vacancies do you have?
Full-time head count 665, vacancies right around 90. I don't have an exact number, between 80 and 100.
Okay. What's your turnover rate?
13.2% for calendar year 22.
Do you have
It's
any?
actually up a little bit for us. During the pandemic, we found when you let people work from home, they don't leave. And so we got down to as low as 10 and 11% during the pandemic. As we've kind of come back to our new normal and having our staff come back, we're at 13.2 now, Mr. Chairman.
Any capital needs that are not funded in
No,
this
sir.
budget? Thank you. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. And batting cleanup on a Monday afternoon, our friends from DOE will give you the podium and let you enlighten us.
A little shorter. Pull that down. Can y'all hear me fine? Thank you very much. I'm Russ Grum. I'm the Chief Financial Officer with the Department of Education. I will go through the major changes within our FY24 budget. I won't mention the $2,000 increases across our various programs or the merit system adjustments or the even the additional $2,000 raises in our various programs. So I'll jump right to the major program, which is going to be our QBE program, which is going to be page 5, 24.17. The first major change in that budget is an increase 24.17.1, which is an increase in funds for enrollment growth and T&E of about $155 million. This is the major impact of this is because of the returning FTEs. If you saw my joint presentation, I think we had about 11,836 increase in our FTEs in our latest count. 24.17.5, there was an increase in this is the $2,000 raise effective September 1st, 2023, which will effectively increase the base teacher salary from $39,092 to $41,092. This is about a $290 million increase. The next major change is you can see 24.17.7 and 24.17.8, which is a reduce to the state charter supplement and a reduce in the QB formula funds for state charter contracts. These are both related to Senate Bill 153, and this is about $51 million reduction. Next major change is the 24.17.9, which is we are very grateful that the governor has fully funded the school counselor ratio at 1 to 450 for all QBE categories. This includes adding the 5 special ed categories and the gifted program, and this is about $26.9 million increase. Next, the next major change, and actually probably the last major change within our budget, is in our school nurse program, 24.20.2. I just want to make a mention of this, that it's a $0 value on your budget sheets. However, that the governor has recommended that we maintain current funding in the formula. If we had run it the way it's intended in law, it would have been about $1.9 million less to the districts, and so he has held them harmless and fully funded that program. And that's the major changes in our budget for 24. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. I'll start. If we could go back to 24.17.7 and 8. Is there anyone from OPB in the room? I'd like to, since there's no one from OPB here in the room, I will make my own assumptions and comments and would love to hear your input. I'd like to understand the rationale behind removing QBE funding for these students. Senate Bill 153 passed. A number of us were on the Education Committee. There is, I would banter back to OPB that there is a bill that is making its way through the legislative process right now. Chairman Irwin can attest to the fact that that bill passed unanimously out of the full Education Committee last week. And as former education chairman, and won't speak for Chairman Irwin, but believe I could state that it was never the intent of the Education Committee, and certainly not the intent of the House, that these 3 schools would simply vanish into thin air like it appears that they have in this budget. And so, again, since there's no one here from OPB to explain that to me, I'm just curious how those reduction in funds existed there, because regardless of what happened with those 3 schools, regardless of Senate Bill 153, these are still students in the state of Georgia that will continue or would continue to be students, and last time I checked would need funding. So I hope that the next time this committee gathers committee members that we will have someone from OPB here who can speak to that and address that. So I'm not asking you to comment on that, but there are questions up here for you, so you're welcome to take questions or as you would.
Yes, sir.
Chairman Irwin.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you covered 90%. Let's put some brackets around these children in these programs. I'm sure in their mind planned on continuing their education and the opportunity to get a diploma. And what we're saying in this budget is, no, we're not going to give you that opportunity that I see. So,
I would agree. Any other questions? Well, I'll finish with my couple of questions if I could.
Yes, sir.
Does the money included in the proposed budget for the $2,000 COLA adequately fund that for all of your agency?
Yes, it does.
What is your current head count and how many vacancies do you have?
We got about 1,300 positions at the Department of Education, and I would say probably about 200 vacancies, but that includes our 3 state schools as well.
And just out of curiosity, on where does that vacancy number, compare to recent years? Is that about your average?
It's about the average. Actually,
Okay.
I mean, it's a little lower in our annual turnover rate. The next question, which is just less than 12%.
Okay.
A few years ago, when COVID hit and we went to a telework environment, it has allowed us to increase our workforce because we're able to reach across Georgia into a lot of counties and in rural Georgia, even to expand our workforce. So that's really helped. I mean, we're still working. We took some big cuts, I think, back in 2013 to our administrative pots, and it's been difficult to try to get back from those cuts, and we've never had those funds restored. But we're working hard to fill the district's needs.
Okay. Do you have any capital needs that are not funded in this budget?
I'd say at the agency level, no. If we were to ask our school districts, we could.
I can assure you we'd get a different answer
Yes, sir.
there. My 2 gold stars and helmet stickers today go to an agency that's giving money back and to you for giving time back. So unless there is anything else for the good of the order, we stand adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.